Chapter 51. Shui Wuhan looked at the skinny young man at the door in surprise. He had mixed feelings. A few months ago, he had met this young man for the first time on Yolan Street in Song City. This young man was like an enraged lion. He jumped up high and waved his hand at him. However, the young man casually slapped his hand away. In the Yi family's courtyard, he asked old Shi to investigate this young man. He found out that his name was Yi Qinghan. He was Yi Dao's son. He was a useless cultivator. He was the poor young master of the Yi family. He didn't care about him. He thought that the young man had Yi Dao's temper, but he didn't have Yi Dao's strength. He was just a useless person. He knew that in the Fire Dragon Continent, in the House of Ares, and in the 5 noble families, those who didn't have strength were useless. Even though he was the direct descendant of the Yi family, they could only ensure that he didn't have to worry about food and clothing. He didn't have any power or influence. As a direct descendant of the 5 noble families, he knew that similar things happened in every family. Of course, his family was no exception. Therefore, after knowing that Yi Qingyu was a resolute person, he didn't think much. He ordered Shui Yi and the others to capture or kill Yi Qinghan. He knew that as long as he did it discreetly, even if the Yi family knew that he did it, they wouldn't make things difficult for him. Because he knew that the Yi family wouldn't make things difficult for him because of a useless person. Then, news came from the Man City. Shui Yi and the others were killed by Yi Qinghan. He started to pay more attention to this useless young master of the Yi family. He took the risk to kidnap Yi Qingyu. However, he didn't expect that Yi Qingquang wouldn't succeed. He even crippled himself. He didn't know what had happened to the Yi family that day. He only knew that Yi Rong had been killed, Yi Jian had been imprisoned, and Yi Qingquang had been crippled. As for the youth that he once thought was trash, he seemed to be valued by the Yi family. He had never thought about hiding what he had done in the Yi family castle from the Yi family. He had never thought that the elders of the Yi family would attack him, the young master of the Shui family. He also knew that the Shui family would give the Yi family a satisfactory price to resolve the hatred the Yi family had towards him. However, when he looked at the thin and weak young man in front of him and the endless killing intent in his squinted eyes, he understood that even if the Yi family did not do anything to him and no longer hated him, this young man would never let him go. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about meeting this youth again. He had also thought about what he should say and what he should do when he met this youth again. But he didn't expect that the two of them would meet again so quickly and so suddenly. He hadn't expected the killing intent in the youth's eyes to be so obvious and so arrogant. So much so that he couldn't say a single word of what he had prepared and wanted to say. Young Master Han, this is the Moon Pavilion. Yi Shisan didn't understand what had happened, nor did he know what had happened to the Yi family not long ago. He only knew that this young master had been quiet, shy, and even a little uncouth for more than a month. Why was he acting so sharp and arrogant at this moment? But he also knew that the target that caused his young master to display such shocking killing intent was Shui Wuhan, the young master of the Shui family. And this was the Moon Pavilion of the Yu family. So he spoke in a low voice to remind his young master, who was about to go berserk. I know this is the Moon Pavilion, so I didn't make a move, Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. His voice was cold and not loud, but he didn't deliberately suppress it. In the quiet 8-direction pavilion, his words were like a clap of thunder, exploding a group of people. There weren't many people in the pavilion, only about 7 or 8. But those who could enter this 4-direction pavilion and sit inside to drink tea were not ordinary people. This 4-direction pavilion didn't receive guests from anywhere, only distinguished guests. And there weren't many people in the House of Ares who could be called distinguished guests by the Yu family, one of the 5 big families. Of course, Shui Wuhan could be considered a distinguished guest. He was the young master of the Shui family, a young elite ranked 10th on the Earth roll. Of course, he was a big figure. And this unfamiliar, immature youth in front of them released his killing intent the moment he entered, ruining the elegant atmosphere in the room. Of course, the people sitting inside weren't very happy. And now this youth was boasting shamelessly that he wanted to make a move on Shui Wuhan. This kid was a little too pretentious, and the people in the room were a little dissatisfied. A young man on the far left stood up, ready to help young Master Shui gain some face. The young man wasn't old, and his face was a little pale. He was quite handsome, and his curly hair was casually draped behind his head, giving him a very demonic air. He looked carefully at Yi Qinghan, and after confirming that he didn't know him, he said unconcernedly, "Yu Ji, which family is this kid from? Why are you so impudent?" "Young Master Long Shuilu, this is the young master of the Yi family." "Young Master Yi, can you give me some face and come in to take a seat quietly?" Yunyang smiled sweetly and explained. Then, she turned to look at Yi Qinghan with an expression of hope. "I'm giving face to your family. That's why I didn't make a move," Yi Qinghan said indifferently. He didn't care about the people in the room at all and walked straight in. He walked to the front of Shui Wuhan, squinted his eyes, and actually smiled. "Shui Wuhan, young Master Shui, you are very good, very good. Shui asked me to pass a message to you. He said that you can go and meet up with them when you have time." Hua! Shui Wuhan didn't move, but his face became a little gloomy. Next to him, Old Shur and Old Mo stood up with a flop and fully activated their battle chi. They stared fiercely at Yi Qinghan, their eyes full of anger and a trace of surprise. Others didn't know, but the two of them and Shui Wuhan were very clear about the meaning of Yi Qinghan's words. Shui Yi and the others were already dead, killed by Yi Qinghan. And Yi Qinghan said that he wanted to meet up with Shui Yi, which was a naked threat and a declaration of war. Yi Shisan and Yi 17 stood nervously behind Yi Qinghan. They didn't know why Yi Qinghan said those words. The two guards of Shui Wuhan immediately looked like they were about to attack. They only knew that if the two old men in front of them wanted to attack, they could only attack at all costs. Shui Wuhan didn't say anything. Old Shur and Old Mo didn't say anything. But the curly-haired young man, young Master Long Shuilu, who was standing beside them, smiled with a hint of anger at the corner of his mouth. It seemed that when Yi Qinghan walked over expressionlessly and didn't even look at him, he felt a little despised. Or perhaps Yi Qinghan's arrogant attitude made him feel very uncomfortable. He twisted his neck and said, "Young master of the Yi family? Isn't the young master of the Yi family Yi Qingquang? Since when can a kid who hasn't even grown his hair represent the Yi family in the elite prefectural tournament? Is there no one left in the Yi family?" This sentence was very hurtful and harsh to the ears. Even the two well-dressed young men sitting next to him, who were obviously young masters, narrowed their eyes. Yi Shisan and Yi 17 narrowed their eyes slightly. Yi Shisan and Yi 17 also looked a little gloomy after hearing this sentence. As for Yi Qinghan, he was still expressionless and indifferent. He just turned his head in surprise and looked at Yi Shisan. He said lightly, "Who is he?" "Young Master Long Shuilu, the nephew of Chief Long." Yi Shisan's lips trembled as he said in a low voice, "Oh." Yi Qinghan nodded and twisted his neck. He asked with some doubt, "Isn't Chief Long's only daughter? Since when did you have a nephew? Could it be that he was arrested?" Yi Qinghan's question caused Yi Shisan's face to darken even more. It also caused the expressions of the two young masters beside him to brighten. Of course, it also caused Long Shuilu's pale face to darken. Yi Qinghan didn't wait for Long Shuilu to speak. He turned his head and looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Well, even if you're a relative of Chief Long, I don't think you were a relative of Shui Wuhan, right? The matter between me and Shui Wuhan. What right do you have to stand up for him? Or I can think of it this way. Are you standing up for the Shui family on behalf of Chief Long? Are you standing up for the Yi family on behalf of Chief Long?" Wow! Yi Qinghan's sharp words shocked everyone present. His words were too sharp. He had actually elevated a small dispute to the level of the chief and the 5 great families. Who would dare to say such things? Who would dare to answer? How could Long Shuilu dare to represent Chief Long? How could he represent Chief Long and make an enemy of the Yi family? Therefore, his mouth was wide open, but he couldn't say anything. However, his handsome face seemed to be slightly distorted. The two young masters sitting next to him also had very distinctive looks. One was a typical muscular man who exuded a fierce and barbaric aura and carried a long sword on his back. On the other hand, the other young master was the exact opposite. He was even more handsome than Long Shuailu. One could even say that he was quite beautiful. If it wasn't for his Adam's apple, people would definitely think that he was a beauty. At this moment, the expressions on their faces were even more distinctive than their looks. However, no matter who it was, if they wanted to laugh but tried hard not to, their expressions would be very special. Yunyang's expression was also very special. She was thinking, why is it that each member of the Yi family is more and more arrogant than the other? Her beautiful phoenix eyes winked at the maid behind her, revealing a special meaning. The maid nodded and quietly left the loft. Of course, young Master Long doesn't represent the chief now. However, I would like to know something. You are just a young master who has fallen from grace. Since when can you represent the Yi family? At this crucial moment, Shui Wuhan finally spoke. Previously, when he was facing Yi Qinghan, he felt that he was in the wrong. Therefore, he remained silent. However, at this moment, Yi Qinghan's insolent and even direct hostile attitude had successfully aroused his arrogance. In the face of such a situation, if he didn't speak, others would definitely look down on him. Oh, you tortoise, you finally dare to speak? Also, since I can stand here today, I can represent the Yi family. Although I don't really care about this identity, Yi Qinghan looked at Shui Wuhan with interest. He raised his eyebrows and said provocatively. Shui Wuhan's pupils shrank. His expression changed a few times. Finally, he said, Yi Qinghan, sometimes it's better to be friendly. I've always been friendly, but I don't think it's necessary to be friendly to people like you. Moreover, I'm not friendly? What's wrong with you? Yi Qinghan sneered and said arrogantly. Seeing that Yi Qinghan was looking for trouble, the atmosphere suddenly became tense. Everyone was silent. The place was quiet, but everyone could smell the gunpowder in the air. Chapter 52. Hearing Yi Qinghan's provocative words, Shui Wuhan almost went berserk. He clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. Finally, he remembered what his father had told him before he left. He suppressed his anger and snorted, I don't want to talk to a lunatic like you. His father, the leader of the Shui clan, Shui Piaoru, had warned him before he left. This time, he came to Ecstasy City not only to meet up with the elites of the four clans, but also to resolve the conflict between him and the Yi family when he planned to kidnap Yi Qingyu and kill Yi Qinghan. After all, the Shui clan was in the wrong. So this time, the Shui clan sent a supreme elder to negotiate with the supreme elder of the Yi family. More importantly, the representative of the Yi family was said to be Yi Qingyu. Yi Qingyu's violent temper was well known in the House of Aries. Therefore, Shui Piaoru warned Shui Wuhan not to do anything out of line if he met the disciples of the Yi family in the Yu clan. Otherwise, Yi Qingyu would lose his temper again. Therefore, when faced with Yi Qinghan's arrogant attitude, Shui Wuhan could only snort coldly. He did not dare to say or do anything. It was obvious that Shui Wuhan knew that Yi Qinghan was not someone to be trifled with. However, the people present did not know that, especially Long Shuailu, who had just been slapped in the face by Yi Qinghan. He was a little curious about Shui Wuhan's behavior today. However, after a while, he thought that perhaps Shui Wuhan did not want to ruin his gentle temperament. He did not want to quarrel with this kid or teach him a lesson. Just now, both of them had been slapped in the face by this young man. Since Shui Wuhan was embarrassed, then he felt that he should stand up and regain his face. Therefore, he stood to the side and said in a somewhat sinister tone, I also think it's better to be kind. Usually, people who are not kind will basically be taught a lesson. They will all be slapped to the ground. The moment Long Shuailu's words left his mouth, the other two young masters sitting beside him smiled at each other, shook their heads, and remained silent. Idiot! Yunyang cursed inwardly. It was obvious that Yi Qinghan wanted to flip out, but Shui Wuhan didn't want to face this young man. Yi Qinghan couldn't find an opportunity to flip out. At this time, the idiot Long Shuailu actually came to the door. He didn't understand why Master Long, a hero of his generation, would have such a nephew. Moreover, this nephew of his didn't understand how much wealth he had. He often used his uncle's name to show off. She shook her head helplessly not daring to get involved. After all, as a middle-level member of the Yu family, she didn't dare to interfere in matters between young masters, nor did she want to. A few months ago, a lot of people could slap me to the ground, and I was slapped a few times. And now, I think a lot of people want to slap me to the ground, but there are a lot of people who are slapped to the ground by me. If you want to have a taste of being patted, you can try. Although his words were a little awkward and sounded like a tongue twister, the arrogance and contempt in his words could be heard even by a deaf person. Humph, it seems that I have to teach you a lesson on behalf of your elders and let you know that the sky outside Song City is even vaster than the sky outside. Long Shuelu sneered and cracked his knuckles. It seemed that he was about to take action. The sky is indeed very vast, but I don't think the area above your head is very vast. Yi Qinghan shook his head, but he suddenly thought of something. He turned his head to look at the two young masters who looked very special and said, what is that? I guess you two are the young masters of the Feng clan and the Hua clan. I have a question to ask you two young masters. Since young Master Long wants to teach me a lesson, why don't you come here? I have no choice but to accept the lesson. It's just that he failed to teach me a lesson and got slapped. You won't be so ungentlemanly as to find the adults of your clan to continue teaching me a lesson, right? The two young masters were obviously stunned by Yi Qinghan's words. They smiled bitterly in their hearts. They didn't provoke anyone, but this young master was obviously trying to drag them down with him. However, since he had been asked, it would be embarrassing not to answer. Thus, the muscular man flexed the muscles on his chest and chuckled. He said, well, under normal circumstances, when I fight with young people, I won't find my clan even if I win or lose. That's very embarrassing. I've never found my clan because I've never lost. The beautiful young master's words were very simple, and his voice was also very feminine. However, the confidence and disdain in his tone were very obvious. You don't have to provoke me. I don't have the habit of doing that. Talk is not real. Go out, it's not good to break things. Long Shuelu snorted and walked out with a black face, expressing his extreme displeasure. It didn't feel good to be looked down upon and looked down upon, let alone by a 15 or 16-year-old youth. Yi Qingyo was in a very good mood at the moment, even though his face was even darker than Long Shuelyo's. At the moment, he was sitting in the three-way tower, not far from the four-way tower, and was slamming the table with force. He didn't know that Yi Qinghan was about to slap someone. He only knew that if he didn't slam the table, no one would know that he was about to flip out. As expected, when he slammed the table, the few people in the room all reacted. Sitting opposite him was an old man dressed in snow-white clothes and with a white beard that looked like a living immortal. The old man's face darkened first, and his fair and clean face was even darker than Yi Qinghan's. There were also two old men sitting on the left. However, their eyes were originally closed as if they were asleep. At this moment, they also opened their eyes. The two of them sighed at the same time and shook their heads. On the right was a beautiful middle-aged woman who still retained her charm. Although the crow's feet at the corner of her eyes showed that age was unforgiving and that she was a butcher's knife. However, the ripples in his eyes and his well-maintained figure still gave people a familiar feeling. At this moment, seeing that Yi Qingyo had slammed the table loudly but did not break, she knew that Yi Qingyo was about to explode. He smiled helplessly and stood up to mediate. Brother Nyo, don't be angry. You're already so old. Why can't you change your temper? You're here to solve the problem, aren't you? Yi Qingyo's bulging eyes bulged even more, as if they were about to pop out. Hearing the middle-aged woman's persuasion, he snorted and turned his head. Sister Yu, if I'm not here to solve the problem, would I be slamming the table? Jade spirit body. How long does it take for a jade spirit body to appear on the continent? But now, he was crippled by that black-hearted wolf, Shuewuan. Also, because of this, our Yi family's elder, Yi Rong, died. He was a martial artist who had a 100% chance of entering the Saint Realm. Also, Yi Qinghuang's cultivation was crippled. You all know Yi Qinghuang's aptitude. He had a high chance of entering the Saint Realm, and he also had a jade spirit body to create a Saint Realm. Our family lost 3 Saint Realm martial artists in one go, and that's not even including the dead core disciples. Look at old Shui. Does he think he can settle this matter with something that's used to dismiss beggars? Let me tell you, there's no way. As they listened to Yi Qingyo's bulging eyes and roaring angrily, black lines appeared on everyone's foreheads. It was said that Yi Qingyo used to be in the underworld when he was young. It was not groundless after all. Look at this smack. Let's not talk about whether Yi Qingquang, a general realm martial artist, could enter the Emperor realm or not. As far as they knew, Yi Rong had been stuck at the first level of the Emperor realm for more than a decade. It was unknown whether he could advance 1 or 2 levels in this lifetime, but he had the cheek to say that he had a 100% chance. As for the compensation that the Shui family was offering, even the higher-ups of the various families who had seen the treasures were tempted. How dare Yi Qingyo say that he was a beggar? You, Yi Qingyo, don't go overboard. I also said that Shui Wuhan was young and ignorant. Our family head also taught him a harsh lesson. Now, I have come with sincerity. We almost emptied out our family's treasury to gather these items. The Shui family's grand elder was so angry that his white beard actually fluttered. He stood up with a thump and said in a low voice. Yi Qingyo snorted disdainfully and said coldly, "Young and ignorant? 26 years old is considered young? Ignorant? How would an ignorant person know about the jade spirit body? Taught a lesson? I know that he is still sitting in the square tower drinking tea, safe and sound. Almost emptied out, but not emptied out, right? Why don't the Yi family secretly send someone to kidnap him the next time someone with a divine body appears in your family? Do you still want the rules? Do you still want the blood oath of the 5 great families? Forget it. Brother Shuefei, Brother Niu, the 2 of you should talk less. Give me some face and take a step back." The middle-aged, beautiful woman, Yu Ji, smiled slightly, and the wrinkles at the corner of her eyes slightly curled up, but she looked a little charming. As the host, she had no choice but to persuade them. She did not want the 2 of them to tear down her building. "All right, Yu Ji, I will give you some face. The Shui family will give you another 5,000 and 6,000 bottles of snow panacea, 3 divine-level secret skills, and 1 condition from the Yi family. Then, we will let this matter go." Yi Qingyo nodded, indicating that he would accept Yu Ji's mediation. When Shuefei heard this, he jumped up in anger. His originally dark face turned even darker. His lips trembled slightly as he said, 5,000 bottles and 3 divine-level secret skills? Why don't you just rob them? If you don't have them, I can at most give you another 500 bottles of snow panacea. Anything more than that is nothing. Pa! When Yi Qingyo heard this, he could not take it anymore. He waved his hand and slapped the table again. This time, he clearly did not control his strength, and the table was instantly shattered. Following Yi Qingyo's slap, the 2 old men at the side simply closed their eyes again, looking as if they were none of their business. Yu Ji also sighed and did not want to care anymore. The scene suddenly became serious and solemn. Sha. At this moment, a woman suddenly walked in from outside. When the woman saw the extremely tense atmosphere, she stuttered while trembling, "Supreme Elder, that they have started fighting. The young master of the Yi family and young master Long Shuelu are fighting." Chapter 53. The young master of the Yi family? He fought with young master Long? Yu Ji laughed bitterly and thought to herself. The members of the Yi family were all carved from the same mold. The younger ones had already started fighting before the older ones had even started fighting. Yu Ji glanced at the servant girl, who didn't dare to breathe loudly under the pressure of Yi Qingyo's aura, then said to the servant girl, "What exactly happened? Tell me in detail." Yi Qingyo saw the look Yu Ji was giving him and didn't want to make things difficult for a little girl. He withdrew his aura and said, "Tell me in detail." The members of the Yi family are not people who look for trouble. When the servant girl saw that Yi Qingyo had relaxed, she hurriedly explained, "It's like this. The young master of the Yi family had just arrived, and when he saw young master Shui Wuhan, it was as if he had seen an enemy. Then young master Shui Wuhan stopped talking, and young master Long Shuelu wanted to teach the young master of the Yi family a lesson, so the 2 of them prepared to fight outside the square restaurant. Look, the members of the Yi family are reasonable. That jade spirit body is the younger sister of that brat, Yi Qinghan. When I came, I told him that the family would take responsibility for his sister's matter, and told him not to touch Shui Wuhan, but look, he didn't. That idiot Long Shuilu was looking for trouble, so he couldn't do anything. I think that if we can't come to an agreement, let him handle it himself. Everyone was speechless again. Did Yi Qingyo really think that his Yi Qinghan was the same Yi Dao from back then? What kind of strength did Shui Wuhan have? Rank 10th on the Earth roll? Could any Tom, Dick, or Harry touch him? Besides, even though Long Shuilu was a bit of a spoiled brat, he had painstakingly cultivated his strength to the second tier of the general realm. It was hard to say who would be the one to be hit. He wasn't worried that Long Shuilu would be hit. Even if he was hit, Chief Long wouldn't care. He was just worried that if Yi Qinghan was hit, Yi Qingyo would take the opportunity to flip out and make her square restaurant a mess. Let's go out and take a look. Yi Qingyo chuckled, but thought to himself, this brat can even cripple Yi Qingquang, who is in the third tier of the general realm, not to mention Long Shuilu, a good-for-nothing. And I heard that this brat is broken through again? Make your move. Seeing that you're young, I'll let you have 3 moves. Long Shuilu stood calmly outside the square tower, a sword in his left hand. The sword was not unsheathed, and his right hand was behind his back. He held his head high, giving off the aura of an expert. What an idiot. There's no beauty by his side, so what's the point of showing off? Why are you putting on airs? The muscular young master was the strongest among the younger generation of the Feng clan. His name was Fengzi. His name was a bit feminine, but he was a very pure man. At this time, he was standing next to the beautiful young master with a feminine temperament and whispered, I reckon it'll be settled in 3 moves. The feminine and delicate young master was the young master of the Hua family, Hua Ji. He shook his head and said, but it was unclear whether he meant that he could defeat Long Shuilu in 3 moves, or that Yi Qinghan could defeat Long Shuilu in 3 moves. Fengzi obviously understood that Hua Ji was referring to the latter, or the former, or both. He knew very well that this friend of his, who was like a transvestite, had grown up in the midst of slaughter. His foresight and battle experience could be said to be the strongest, and Fengzi had never doubted his foresight. However, when he looked at Yi Qinghan again, his gaze was a bit different. It was a bit scorching. Yi Qinghan narrowed his eyes slightly. Before coming here, Yi Qingyo had instructed him, and his sister, who was lying in the mountain behind the Yi clan, had all made him apprehensive. That was why he didn't kill Shui Wuhan the moment he saw him. That was why he had a fire burning in his heart. At this time, this fire was being fanned even more fiercely by Long Shuilu. Looking at the arrogant Long Shuilu before him, he felt as if he was looking at the old Yi Qingquang. So he narrowed his eyes and considered whether he should seriously injure this idiot with 1 move. Little Han, don't cripple him. Don't expose your body fusion technique. You can do whatever you want. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly sounded beside his ear. Yi Qinghan raised his eyebrows and looked to the left with a smile. He could tell that this was Yi Qingyo's telepathic message. Since the old fellow was here and had spoken, he no longer had any scruples and shouted, Battle Beast Fusion. A black shadow faintly appeared in front of his chest and quickly entered his body. When a faint black tattoo appeared at the corner of his eye, a huge aura instantly enveloped the entire area in front of the square tower. It was as if the air had frozen. Long Shuilu looked at the young man in front of him in surprise. How did this young man's aura become so strong after the Battle Beast fusion? He didn't dare to be careless and quickly released his battle aura, forming a yellow battle aura shield around his body. 8th grade Battle Beast? Fengzi and Hua looked at each other and saw a trace of surprise in each other's eyes. The Yi family had really hidden their strength well. Looking at the aura of the body fusion technique, it was very likely to be an 8th grade Battle Beast. As for the Holy Beast, he didn't think too much about it. After all, the Yi family had only produced 1 Holy Beast in a few thousand years. The Yi family was probably going to have another strong warrior. Old Niao, your family has really hidden their strength well. When did you have a talented young man with an 8th grade Battle Beast? Furthermore, he's already at the 1st level of the general realm at such a young age. His future is limitless. At the entrance of the square tower not far away, one of the two elders from the Feng and Hua families who had been silent all this time finally spoke up. His eyes were filled with surprise and envy. An 8th-grade battle beast, and this young man's great talent could be foreseen that the Yi family would have another terrifying expert in the future. Yi Qingyo laughed foolishly, but in his heart he thought to himself, "We're the ones who hid it. It's this brat who has been hiding it well recently, and very well at that. It's only been a month, and he's actually broken through to the general realm. It seems like the clan leader was right. This brat really has a lot of secrets." Xue Fei, on the other hand, stood silently at the side. His face darkened even more as he thought about how to settle the matter today. Looking at the posture of the old and the young, they would probably bleed a lot. However, Yi Qinghan didn't know that 4 old fellows were secretly watching him from afar. He only knew that this young Master Long in front of him had to be ruthlessly slapped to the ground in order to completely extinguish the fire in his heart. Therefore, he made his move. Feeling the surging power in his body that he had never felt before, he was full of confidence as he swung his fist and smashed it directly at Long Xuelio's battle aura shield that was emitting a faint yellow light. He didn't use any fancy moves, nor did he use his battle aura to transform into various weapons like the other General Realm warriors. Because he had just entered the General Realm, he didn't know how to do it. He simply circulated all the battle aura in his body, turned into a horned rhinoceros, and smashed it down savagely. With Yi Qinghan's wind-like speed and the surging aura condensed from the vast battle aura on his left fist, the temperature in the air suddenly became scorching hot. When the golden fist smashed onto the yellow battle aura shield, it caused a violent explosion that almost set the air on fire. Bang! As was expected, the yellow battle chi cover was broken in a split second. Like a cannonball, Long Xuelu was ferociously sent flying backward and hit the solid wall behind him. After bouncing back and rolling on the ground for a few times, he directly passed out. On the surface, Yi Qinghan was only a level 1 General Realm warrior. However, because of his incomparably special Dantian, the battle aura in his body was almost more than that of a level 2 General Realm warrior. After merging with his battle beast, his strength had reached the terrifying martial realm. The battle aura shield of Long Xuelu, a level 2 General Realm warrior, instantly shattered upon contact with Yi Qinghan's fist. If it weren't for Yi Qinghan seeing this and withdrawing most of his battle aura, Long Xuelu would probably have been smashed into a pile of minced meat. Ugh! Ah! Ha! After the 3 exclamations, the entire place fell into dead silence. Feng Zi, who was as strong as a mountain, opened his mouth wide. His expression was a little exaggerated, but the battle intent instantly ignited in his eyes was exceptionally fiery. The beautiful transvestite lowered his head timidly. Under his long eyelashes, a pair of blinking eyes concealed his shock and bewilderment. Xue Wuhan's face was still very gloomy, but his black and gray eyes were full of shock and bewilderment. He didn't seem to understand how the little guy he could casually slap away a few months ago could grow to such an extent. Yunyang, on the other hand, slightly frowned. She looked at the young master of the Yi family, who was silently standing in front of her, and the bald guard who was walking towards Long Xuelu. She was a little worried. Long Xuelu didn't bring many guards with him. He was a bald, middle-aged man with a slightly dark complexion who had been silent the whole time. The bald, middle-aged man hadn't said a word since Yi Qinghan came in. He didn't even make a sound when Yi Qinghan almost killed Long Xuelu, nor did he stop him. Only now that Long Xuelu had fainted on the ground, he walked out and silently picked up Long Xuelu. Then, he turned to look at Yi Qinghan and said, "Thank you, young Master Yi, for showing mercy. Long Fifth will take his leave first." Yunyang let out a sigh of relief. She knew that since Long Fifth said this, he definitely wouldn't cause any more trouble. She also knew that this dark, bald man was a level 2 Imperial Realm expert. Once he caused trouble, it would definitely be very troublesome. Therefore, she smiled and arranged for someone to bring Long Fifth away to treat Long Xuelio's injuries. Damn, old Nyo, This kid from your family is so fierce. That power just now was at least the strength of a marshal. Your family has found a treasure. This is another Yi Dao. The great elder of the Feng family nodded and looked at Yi Qinghan enviously. They were all experts and could easily tell that Yi Qinghan had left something up his sleeves. Old Nyo's family is not bad. My family Xiao Chao is no match for him. Old Man Hua also nodded and said seriously. Yu Ji was also beaming with joy. She smiled charmingly and said, Brother Nyo, congratulations. Not at all. Not at all. This kid is still a lot weaker than those two freaks, Feng Zihua and Hua Hua. Yi Qinghan shook his head and said very modestly. However, he suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Xue Fei and said, but I think it shouldn't be difficult to eliminate Xue Wuhan. How about old Xue? Let them fight to the death. After the fight, I don't want that stupid thing of yours. What do you think? Chapter 54. Air! Xue Fei looked at Yi Qinghan's smiling face, but his heart was pounding. This old black bull was smiling so obscenely. Could it be that Yi Qinghan still had a trump card that defied the natural order? One had to know that Xue Wuhan was extraordinarily talented and was currently at the 3rd level of the general realm. Coupled with the 12 golden-shelled insects that he was raising, even a 1st or 2nd level marshal would not dare to say that they could defeat him for sure. Old bull, why are you so confident in that kid of yours? You have to know that Xue Wuhan is a genius that only appears once in 100 years in the House of Aries. Even my little madman admits that he is no match for him. The Feng family's grand elder revealed a shocked expression and said with great astonishment, Old Fei, bet with him. I don't believe that a 15 or 16-year-old kid can fly in the sky. The Hua family's grand elder also took the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. Yu Ji, on the other hand, was silent at the side. However, the expression on her face also showed that she did not believe it. The three of them echoed each other in silence. They cooperated very well. Of course, they hoped that Xue Fei would bet with them. After all, these two youngsters were very talented. No matter who died in the end, it would be more beneficial than detrimental to their family. Xue Fei's heart was pounding even harder. These three were obviously adding fuel to the fire. Xue Wuhan was the only son of the patriarch and the future successor of the family. Anyone could think of exchanging some external objects for a powerhouse that had a high chance of becoming a sage in the future. Hence, he was silent. I say, Old Man Xue, what do you want? Why don't you say something? Let's have a fight to the death. I don't want your things after we're done. Yi Qinghan was a little impatient. He bulged his bull eyes and looked provocatively at Xue Fei. You! Xue Fei was speechless again. How was this Yi Qinghan a green bull? It was clearly a wild bull. The Green Knight Bull's battle beast was of the 8th grade, and its body was at the 2nd level of the Saint Realm. There were not many in the House of Aries who could defeat it after merging. At the very least, Xue Fei knew that if he were to fight this wild bull to the death, he would definitely die if he couldn't escape. Xue Fei, I still think that Xue Wuhan has a higher chance of fighting against the boy from the Yi family. The Hua family's Grand Supreme Elder started to encourage Xue Fei again. Yu Ji flew away from the Grand Supreme Elder of the Hua family. She was a little angry at him for wanting the world to fall into chaos. She sighed and said, All right, Brother Nyo, let me say something. Xue family will add 2,000 bottles of the best grade snow panacea and this saint-level secret skill on top of the original offer. How about we let this matter go? The prefecture battle is just around the corner, and our common enemy is the other two prefectures. Don't make a fool of yourself. Xue Fei was silent for a while before he gritted his teeth and said, Sai, this is also Xue Wuhan's fault. Forget it. We'll do as Yu Ji says. Brother Niao. Yu Ji was a little dissatisfied after seeing Yi Qingyo's silence. After all, the Xue family was bleeding a lot this time. If Yi Qingyo still didn't agree, then he wouldn't be giving her face. I have one more condition. Yi Qingyo was silent for a while before he spoke again. However, before Xue Fei and Yu Ji could answer, he continued, Don't panic. I don't want anything else. I want the right to exchange for the first prize. The right to exchange for the first prize? Everyone pondered. After a moment of silence, the Feng family's Grand Supreme Elder was the first to speak. You want a spirit pill? As long as your family's disciple can get enough points, I don't mind. 10,000 points is not easy to get. I don't have any objection since that boy from your family is so fierce. The Hua family's Grand Supreme Elder also expressed his opinion. I agree. Shui Fei and Yu Ji expressed their opinions at the same time. Even though the spirit pill was very tempting, it could only be exchanged with 10,000 points. They heard that the Demon God Mansion and Barbarian God Mansion had sent out many elites to obtain the spirit pill. They didn't want to sacrifice a large number of their family's elites for a single treasure. The gains would not make up for the losses. All right, since everyone has agreed, Brother Fei and Brother Niu, come and sign this agreement. In the future, don't use this matter to destroy the unity of the 5 clans. Yu Ji sighed in relief and led the group into the tripartite pavilion again. After the agreement was signed, the atmosphere in the pavilion clearly relaxed. Yi Qingyo no longer wore a sour expression and began to chat with the Feng family's Grand Supreme Elder. The Shui family's Grand Supreme Elder no longer wore a dark expression and continued to chat with Yu Ji and the Hua family's Grand Supreme Elder. After a while, the atmosphere in the pavilion became harmonious. It was as if they had become old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time and began to chat about their parents. What is that? Yu Ji, the Feng family's Grand Supreme Elder, seemed to remember something. He suddenly turned to Yu Ji and said, "Isn't it your family's Summer Flame Festival in 3 days? I heard that your family has a peerless saintess who will appear for the first time." "That's right, my family Xiao Chao is here for this peerless beauty of yours. Your family is also very mysterious. Every time the saintess appears, she will only appear during the coming-of-age ceremony, the Summer Flame Festival. Who knows how many young geniuses fall for her?" Hua family's Grand Supreme Elder Yi nodded and said, "Ha! How many young geniuses fall for her? Wasn't my family's yin dumped by Yi Dao last time? In the end, she died of depression." Yu Ji sighed deeply and turned to look at Yi Qingyo with some hidden bitterness. She began to talk about the past. Yi Qingyo was startled. Seeing Yu Ji's bitter expression, he bulged his bull eyes and said bashfully, "Don't look at me, I didn't dump you. Wasn't Yi Dao almost driven out by my family's patriarch because of this? After that, Yi Dao died. Your family's Yu Yin missed him so much that she fell ill. In the end, she died of depression. I was also very sad. Sigh, this is probably their fate." "All right, Yu Ji, don't bring up the past. Why don't you ask your family's Qingsheng to choose my family's Fengzi this time? I guarantee that my son will definitely treat Qingsheng like a treasure. Moreover, my family's Fengzi is quite good-looking and is quite strong." The Feng family's Grand Supreme Elder chuckled and said. When the Hua family's Grand Supreme Elder saw that the Feng family's Grand Supreme Elder was acting as a matchmaker, he was displeased. "Good-looking? How can your family's big guy be as good-looking as my family Xiao Chao? My family Xiao Chao is a flower of our Luo Hua city. There's no doubt about her strength. As long as she successfully ambushes a marshal, she will definitely kill her opponent in one move. F***CK. You call that good-looking? He looks neither human nor demonic. If thrown into the demon god residence, he will definitely be a member of the royal family. Even if he can kill a marshal with a sneak attack, he has to succeed first." When the Feng family's Grand Supreme Elder heard this, he couldn't take it anymore. He widened his eyes and roared in anger. "Your family is the real transvestite. If you throw that lunatic of yours into the barbarian god residence, he will still be the barbarian god's successor." Yu Ji let out a deep sigh. She looked at these 2 clowns and shook her head. "All right, brothers, please spare this little sister. It's not like you don't know about this Summer Flame Festival. In the end, the one who will choose the protector is that girl, Yi Qingsheng. I don't have this right, do I? What's the point of you arguing? Summer Flame Festival? What Summer Flame Festival?" Yi Qinghan was sitting in the square tower. He originally wanted to ask Fengzi when he could depart for Dragon City, but Fengzi said that he would only depart after the Summer Flame Festival 3 days later. Hence, he asked in confusion. Hearing Yi Qinghan's question, Feng Zi and the flowers and plants looked at him as if they were looking at a monster. Even Shui Wuhan, who was sitting quietly at the side, twitched his nose. "You don't know about the Summer Flame Festival?" Feng Zi asked in astonishment as he puffed up his iron-like chest muscles. "You don't know? Is the Summer Flame Festival very famous?" Yi Qinghan was a little baffled. He knew about the Summer Festival. Let me put it this way. The Summer Flame Festival is actually the most important festival of the Yu clan. Feng Zi chuckled, and his eyes revealed an indescribable feeling. He continued, "What is the Yu clan most famous for? Beauties, peerless beauties. Every year during the Summer Flame Festival, they will send a peerless beauty to the Moon Tower to be an artist for a year. Under normal circumstances, that beauty will be the goddess of the Moon Tower's guests. She is definitely a super red card. After a year, the beauties will be auctioned off, and the three with the highest bid will have the chance to win the beauty." "Three? Not the one with the highest bid?" Yi Qinghan's curiosity was piqued by Feng Zi's description, and he asked with interest. "No." Feng Zi shook his head and sighed. "This is also the most brilliant part of the Yu clan. In the end, it's all up to the lady to choose the one she likes among the three. This way, the Yu clan will receive great benefits, and their lady will marry happily. Don't you think it's killing two birds with one stone?" Indeed clever. Then, will the Yu clan have a new beauty in 3 days?" Yi Qinghan nodded and sighed. "Beauty, a peerless beauty that can topple cities and countries. Let me tell you, you're in luck. Today is the Calm Lake Summer Flame Festival that the Yu clan holds once every 15 years. That's a grand ceremony for the younger generation of the House of Aries. Your young master, have been waiting for years." Feng Zi flicked his bangs, and his eyes emitted a fiery glow as if he wanted to burn the entire square tower. "Calm Lake Summer Flame Festival? Didn't you just say the Moon Tower Summer Flame Festival? Isn't the Calm Lake the place where the Yu clan's descendants live?" Yi Qinghan was getting more and more confused as he listened. If the Yu clan sends a peerless beauty out of the Moon Tower every year, then the Summer Flame Festival wouldn't be that famous. Let me tell you, the Summer Flame Festival is famous because of the Calm Lake Summer Flame Festival that happens once every 15 years, which is 3 days from now. Every 15 years, the Yu clan selects a saintess from hundreds of female disciples. Then, they invite all the descendants of the great clans to gather at the Calm Lake to watch the saintess coming-of-age ceremony. And their saintess will choose 2 guardians from dozens of youthful talents. They will observe her for 3 years, and the last person will return with the beauty. Furthermore, the talent who is fortunate enough to marry the saintess will receive the position of a lifetime guest elder of the Yu clan, and will receive the full support of the Yu clan. A peerless beauty and an unparalleled status are within reach. Tell me, which talent in the world wouldn't go crazy for it? Who wouldn't want it? The more Feng Zi spoke, the more excited he became. It was as if he had already succeeded, and the corners of his mouth curled into an intoxicated and wanton smile. "Didn't Yi Dao not want it back then?" Just as Feng Zi finished speaking, the transvestite flower and plant suddenly spoke after a long silence. Yi Qinghan looked at the flower and plant in surprise. This matter actually involved his father? His father, who was so awesome back then, was actually so awesome that he didn't even want the Yu clan saintess? How many Yi Daos do you think there are in the world? He doesn't love the saintess, but he loves the red card of the Moon Tower back then. Feng Zi snorted and said with dissatisfaction. However, he still admired Yi Dao back then, and his tone was still very respectful. He doesn't love the saintess? Only loves the red card? Yi Qinghan's interest was piqued. It seemed like it was related to his mother's background. Looking at Yi Qinghan's very interested expression, Feng Zi was completely speechless. "You don't even know about the Yi family? Have you been locked up for secret training since you were young? That's too hard. Let me tell you, 15 years ago, Yi Dao was also invited to the Quiet Lake Summer Fire Festival. Back then, he was peerless and had unparalleled martial arts. In the end, he wasn't charmed by that generation's saintess. Instead, he charmed that generation's saintess, Yu Yin-er. However, this guy didn't like Yu Yin-er. He only loved the red card of the Moon Tower, Yu Shui-er. In the end, he rejected Yu Yin-er and brought Yu Shui-er back to the Yi family. In the end, Yu Yin-er, who was bewitching, died of depression. When she died, she wasn't even 30 years old. Don't you think it's sad? Oomph. Your life is destined to be sad because I'm determined to get you ching this time. Suddenly, the unique sharp voice of the flower and plant was heard. Hearing this, Fengzi jumped up and shouted, "Humph, you damn transvestite, don't even think about it. I'll fight whoever dares to snatch you Qingsheng." So that's what happened. The Summer Fire Festival seems to be a little interesting. Fengzi and the flower and plant started to curse at each other. However, Yi Qing'an ignored them and thought to himself, "So my father and mother have such a tragic story. It seems like the Summer Fire Festival in 3 days will be very lively." Also, he was a little interested in the legendary beauty, Yu Qingsheng, but of course, it was just a little. Chapter 55. The Tranquil Lake was, of course, a lake. It was originally located outside the eastern city wall of the Ecstasy City, but after many years of renovation by the Yu clan, it was surrounded. The eastern city wall was expanded several times, and now, the entire Tranquil Lake was included in the Ecstasy City. The Tranquil Lake wasn't big. Strictly speaking, it couldn't even be called a lake. It was just a big reservoir. However, since the Yu clan called it a lake, others would naturally call it the Tranquil Lake. The Tranquil Lake wasn't as quiet as a stagnant pool. Not only was it not quiet, but it was also windy all year round, so the lake water never calmed down. There would always be waves, waves, and waves. This is the Tranquil Lake? Nothing special? Yi Qinghan and the other young masters followed behind Yunyang and arrived at the side of the blue lake. Although this place could be considered as having verdant hills and clear waters, and the scenery was pleasing to the eye, it was still just an ordinary small lake. It was far from the Tranquil Lake's image as a holy land in the eyes of the world's geniuses. They couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. There's nothing special about this lake. What's special is the small island in the middle of the lake. That's where the core disciples of the Yu clan live. There are peerless beauties there. Usually, it's a forbidden and holy land for men unless it's the Summer Fire Festival. We're the first batch of people to enter the Holy Land in 15 years. Don't you think it's special? Fengzi was still carrying his long sword. He chuckled and whispered into Yi Qinghan's ear. A forbidden place for men? Yi Qinghan was indeed stunned by this news. Looking at the hazy little island in the distant lake, she nodded her head. She couldn't help but be even more puzzled as she softly asked, "There isn't a single man inside?" "Absolutely not." Fengzi nodded seriously. Yi Qinghan was a little speechless. He shut his mouth in embarrassment, but his heart felt like it was being blown by a cold wind. He shuddered. If they were to encounter a group of resentful women pouncing on them like wolves and tigers, would they be able to hold them off? "Young masters, this way, please." Just as Yi Qinghan was letting his imagination run wild, a small boat approached from afar. Yunyang smiled and gestured for them to board the boat. "Young Master Han, after you." Fengzi flexed his chest muscles to show his elegance. "Huh? You're already in bed? Oh no, get on the boat." Yi Qinghan felt a lingering fear in his heart. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Brother Fengzi, you go first. My body is weak, I can't take it." "Humph, since the two of you are so polite, I will go first." Shui Wuhan waved his folding fan, smiled, and got into the boat. The beautiful flowers and plants flicked the edge of their clothes and followed. Seeing this, Fengzi and Yi Qinghan also followed. The boat wasn't big, but the decorations were very elegant. It was like a small living room. The front and back of the boat were separated by a thin silk curtain, and the scenery outside could be vaguely seen. They went in and took their seats. Yunyang also came in and served them a few cups of tea. Then, she bowed and walked out of the boat, standing at the front of the boat. The Yu clan is indeed the Yu clan. Even the person rowing the boat is an exceptional beauty. Fengzi looked around once she came in, and finally, her eyes fixed on the woman on the bed at the back of the boat. Through the blurry curtain, a graceful woman with one hand on the oar at the back of the boat could be seen. Only the side of her body could be seen. The woman was wearing a cyan palace dress, but her face was covered by a white silk scarf. Although the curtain was a bit blurry and her face was covered, just her graceful and curvaceous figure, as well as her elegant temperament, were enough to make one's heart sway. Feng Zi's words awakened the people on the ship, and they all turned their heads to look at her. Hua Chao and Feng Zi were the most erect. They stared unblinkingly at the masked woman, and they couldn't stop praising her. Shui Wuhan's black and gray eyes were flashing. He waved the fan in his hand, and he looked like he was admiring her. However, a hint of greed flashed in his eyes, and it betrayed his true feelings. Yi Qing'an only took a glance before looking away. It was mainly because Shui Wuhan's pretentious expression made him lose his appetite, and he wasn't in the mood. Moreover, Feng Zi said that there were a bunch of women who had never seen a man living on the island, so he was a little afraid. Squinting at Shui Wuhan, Yi Qing'an silently pinched his fingers. Thinking of what Yi Qingyo said 3 days ago, he let go of his fingers again and picked up the tea on the table to drink. That day, after slapping Long Shuilu, he wanted to find something to do and use the opportunity to destroy Shui Wuhan. However, Yi Qingyo directly transmitted a message to him, telling him to bear with it. That night, Yi Qingyo came to the place where he was sleeping and had a secret talk with him. He told him that because of Yi Qingyu, the Shui family had lost a lot of treasures, which could be exchanged for a spiritual pill. Yi Qingyo told him darkly that he shouldn't do anything now, and that once he got the Shui family's treasures, he could find an opportunity to kill Shui Wuhan. Of course, he had to do it secretly, and he had to do it cleanly without leaving any evidence. Once the Yu family's matter was settled, they would go to the prefecture battle, and it would be a 3-way battle. At that time, there would be plenty of opportunities to kill Shui Wuhan. Therefore, Yi Qing'an could only bear with it for now. Fortunately, he had vented a little of the anger he had been holding back that day on Long Shuilu, so he wasn't as angry now. Moreover, he knew that Shui Wuhan was someone he had to kill, and that he had to die, so there was no need to be too calculative with a dead person. Yunyang, why haven't you set sail yet? Everyone admired the graceful figure of the woman rowing the boat, and they couldn't help but be more interested in entering the tranquil lake island, and they couldn't wait any longer. If the woman rowing the boat could be so outstanding, wouldn't all the women inside be sky immortals? Gentlemen, please wait a moment. There is still one more person. Ah, coming. Yunyang answered respectfully. Everyone looked at the front of the boat in surprise. Who else was qualified to sit on the same boat as them? However, when they saw a handsome face and slightly curled hair through the blurry curtain, they all smiled slightly. Gentlemen, you are so early. Shuilu is late, please excuse me. Long Shuilu walked in with a smile and greeted them politely. His face was still radiant, and there was no difference from the first time they met 3 days ago. Hello, Brother Shuilu. The people on the boat all smiled naturally, and they seemed to have forgotten what happened a few days ago. They smiled and greeted him. Shui Wuhan folded his folding fan and pointed to the seat beside him. He even personally poured a cup of tea for Long Shuilu. Yi Qing'an didn't say anything and just nodded slightly. He silently drank his tea, but he admired Long Shuilu's shamelessness and prostrated himself in front of him. Long Shuilu took a sip of his tea and said with a smile, "What are you all chatting about? Nothing much? I'm just sighing at the peerless beauty of the Yu clan's women. Young Master Long, even the Yu clan's woman rowing the boat is so beautiful. It is hard to imagine how beautiful the women of the tranquil lake island are." Although Feng Zi looked well-developed, his mind wasn't simple. Although he was rumored to have a fiery temper, he seemed to be very tactful today. He didn't offend anyone, and he befriended everyone. He was a smooth and slick person. Oh! Long Shuilu looked at the back of the boat seriously and revealed an intoxicated expression. He sighed and said, "Such a woman is truly enchanting. Unfortunately, she is masked, and I can't see her true appearance. What a pity." Of course. A woman masked also has a kind of hazy beauty. What's the saying? What you can't get is the best. This woman in front of me has the essence of it. What you can't see is more beautiful. Shui Wuhan smiled faintly. He didn't seem to care about the cold eyes that Yi Qinghan was shooting at him. He waved his folding fan elegantly. Brother Wuhan, you should be a poet. You can recite a good poem. Hua Hua smiled gently and said with a sigh. Fengzi also nodded and sighed. Brother Wuhan is right. The ancients said that a woman's most beautiful is when she takes off her clothes and when she comes out of the bath. I think we can add that to the list. A woman with a mask is also very beautiful. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. All of your words are well thought out, and each of your words has a profound meaning. You can all be called scholars. In my opinion, a woman with a mask is either extremely ugly or extremely beautiful. I can foresee that this woman is definitely an extremely beautiful woman. Long Shuelu nodded and moved closer. Yi Qinghan shook his head, but he sighed deeply in his heart. These perverts actually called themselves scholars? It was true that each generation was more unruly than the previous one. What? Young Master Han, do you have any other opinion? Fengzi asked curiously when she saw Yi Qinghan shaking his head silently. I don't have any opinion. I think we should ask Yunyang to start the boat, or we won't be able to make it for lunch. Yi Qinghan said lightly. He didn't want to express any opinion. Shui Wuhan's flirtatious performance made him want to vomit, and Long Shuelio's shameless participation made the trip to the calm lake that he was originally interested in become boring. He stared blankly through the window at the rippling lake in the distance. He thought of his sister in Songcheng, and his mood became gloomy. Darling, let's start the boat. Yunyang had followed Yi Qinghan into the boat. She had been quietly standing to the side, not saying anything, nor showing any expression. When she saw Yi Qinghan speak, she smiled and said to the woman at the back of the boat. The woman behind the boat responded in a low voice. Although her voice was soft, it was very clear and moving, like the chirping of an oriole. Everyone who heard it felt numb and sore. Everyone present was at least at the general realm, so they all heard it clearly. They couldn't help but look at the woman behind the boat with even more interest. They slowly glided through the window, breaking through the water, and gradually moved towards the small island in the middle of the lake. Yunyang looked thoughtfully at the woman behind the boat and suddenly said, Darling, why don't you sing a song for the young masters on the boat to relieve their tiredness? What do you think? Long Shuelu heard her and immediately said with a smile, we couldn't ask for more. I'm all ears. Fengzi and Hua Hua smiled as well, while Yi Qinghan nodded his head. Thank you, Shui Wuhan said with a smile. The veiled woman behind the boat still didn't say anything or turn around. She silently rowed the boat. After a long time, she sighed and sang softly. The shadow of the vermilion building is at noon. The jade tree is low in the shade. The moon is already 3. Greasy powder secretly sells silver carvings. The wrong knife leisurely cuts the mud golden robe. The embroidered bed is afraid of attracting the black dragon's bark. The embroidered word worries teach the blue bird's beak. 100 flavors refined to take pity on the mother. 1,000 flowers bloom. Half suitable for a man who can envy the company of a mandarin duck. The parrot is speechless. The waves like to swim bees. The magpies pretend to guess. The magpies murmur. But I love the number of palms. Every time I remember the light of the hawksbill hairpin. The years of sorrow in the smoke cave are still there. The night of disappointment on the Star Bridge is empty. The season in front of the window is shameful. The romantic world smiles bitterly. Only the incense burner steals the wages, secretly hangs down the sandalwood sleeves to learn the ginseng. One must know that it is difficult to calm the heart, but one is willing to part with the clouds. Seeing the scenery fall, the sound of the strings still drifting, looking toward the south. The song was a poem, without the accompaniment of drums, music, or lights to add color to the beautiful scenery. It was just a simple singing. The voice of the person singing did not have any special emotions, and there was no dancing to add color. But everyone felt intoxicated, as if they had flown to the heavenly palace and listened to the peerless celestial song sung by a fairy. Good song, good melody, good poem. Such a beautiful song can only be found in the heavens. how many times can one hear it in the mortal world? Lady Nan Nan, this song really makes my heart surge. I am afraid that I will not be able to taste meat for 3 months. After a long time, Long Shuelu loudly clapped his hands and stood up, looking at the graceful figure behind the boat with tender affection. He laughed loudly and said, "Pa!" Shue Wuhan waved his folding fan, stood up, and said with a slight smile, "It is indeed a good poem. Who can envy the company of a mandarin duck? The parrot is speechless. I am ashamed. Lady Nan Nan, why do you envy others? Why do you feel ashamed? You must know, with ladies' charm and talent, I am afraid that all the geniuses in the world will be attracted to Lady, right? At the very least, the 5 of us will be charmed by you, right?" Extremely right, extremely right. You sang it really well. Even though I don't know much about music, I think even a pig would be able to tell that this is a peerless song. Fengzi laughed heartily and sincerely used a lame joke to flatter the old man. Hua Chao also nodded and very seriously said, "It is indeed a celestial song." Yet Yi Qinghan sat there alone, continuing to remain silent. He half raised his cup of tea and looked at the cup in front of him in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking. Seeing this, Yunyang could not hold back the curiosity in her heart and turned sideways to ask, "Young Master Han, do you feel that the song is not good?" The 4 turned around and looked at Yi Qinghan, also a little puzzled. Such a beautiful song. It was also the first time they had heard it, so why did Yi Qinghan appear so silent? Or even somewhat disdainful? Under the gazes of the others, Yi Qinghan remained silent for a while, then slowly drank his tea, and leisurely said, "The song is a good song, the poem is a good poem, and the singing is also very good, but this poem, this song, and this scene, the beautiful artistic conception created by it, have been ruined by some idiots. How sad, how lamentable." What did these words mean? Fengzi and Hua Chao felt a little strange, while Long Shuelu and Shue Wuen's expressions were a little gloomy. They could hear the idiots in Yi Qinghan's words, and a glimmer of light appeared in Yunyang's eyes, and the corners of her mouth curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. And at the back of the boat, the veiled woman, who had never turned around, suddenly turned around. Behind the white silk scarf that covered her face, a pair of beautiful black eyes that shone brightly showed some faint interest. Chapter 56. What do you mean? Young Master Han. Fengzi saw that Shue Wuhan and Long Shuelu were about to go berserk, so she hurriedly tried to smooth things over and asked in confusion. "Yeah? I don't think they're wrong," Hua Hua said in confusion. "They're not wrong, but what they're saying is bullsh asterisk T. What's so exciting about singing and not knowing the taste of meat? What's the point of being envious? What's the point of being ashamed?" Yi Qinghan sighed deeply, shook his head, and continued, "You don't even know the meaning of this song, or this poem, and you dare to talk nonsense? It's a good poem about the scenery in front of you, and the helplessness of the passing of time. How can it make people excited? Isn't it funny?" "Oh." We're all ears to young Master Han's opinion. Shue Wuhan's face darkened. He quickly waved the fan in his hand, as if he wanted to get rid of the unhappiness in his heart. "I'd like to hear the details," Long Shuelu said coldly. "Young Master Han, you know poems? Tell us, tell us." Fengzi's eyes lit up. She was very interested. In the Fire Dragon continent, martial prowess was the most important thing. Few people would understand the poems of literati. Although I don't understand, I feel that what Yi Qinghan said is meaningful. I also heard this poem, and there's a sense of loneliness and helplessness. I just can't describe it, Hua Hua said with a frown as he touched his beautiful face. Yunyang and the woman at the back of the boat didn't say anything. However, when Yi Qinghan described the poem, their eyes seemed to simultaneously emit a ray of light. Then, a sense of loneliness and nostalgia appeared in their eyes at the same time. "Little darling, I have a question to ask." Yi Qinghan didn't say anything. He just turned his body to look at the woman behind the boat. He looked at her black and shiny eyes and said calmly. The woman behind the boat bowed and said softly, "Young Master Yi, please speak. If I'm not mistaken, this poem was composed by Senior Yu Yin, right?" Yi Qinghan's words shocked everyone. Yun Yang and the woman at the back of the ship looked at Yi Qinghan in astonishment, not knowing how he knew about it. After all, this was the first time he had sung this poem to outsiders. The woman at the back of the ship frowned slightly and asked doubtfully, "It's indeed written by the previous saintess, Yu Yin Er. Have you heard it before, young master?" "Never heard of it before," Yi Qinghan said faintly. He seemed to have thought of something as he turned around and looked at the island in the distance through the curtains. He sighed and said, "This poem can be divided into 4 stanzas. The first stanza is the scenery in March outside the window and the needlework in the room. It is difficult to teach the bluebird to deliver the letter. It contains the unspeakable worries of the young girls. They're a little nervous, a little confused, and a little resistant. The second stanza is about the mandarin ducks having company. The parrots are silent, the bees are flying, and the foxes are murmuring. It reveals the young girls' feelings of loneliness in life. They are not lamenting or envying anything, nor are they yearning for love or a man." Yi Qinghan spoke leisurely as if he had turned into a wandering poet, a romantic who was dissatisfied with the reality. The last sentence was a serious criticism of Xue Wuhan for acting coquettishly. Then, without waiting for Xue Wuhan to explain, he continued, "The third stanza is about a few years in the smoke cave and a night on the Star Bridge. It expresses melancholy about the legendary love affair between a man and a woman. It contains a kind of calling for a fulfilling life and disappointment in love. I suppose that at that time, Senior Yu Yin was very disappointed in the love affair that had just started and ended so quickly. She was a little painful and heartbroken. She longed for a different kind of life." The fourth stanza continues the theme of the previous stanza. It expresses the fear of the desolation of the scenery, the pursuit of the joy of life, the understanding of life, and the pursuit of love. The meaning is especially open and persistent. This poem tells the story of Senior Yu Yin. When she was a young girl in the Yu family, she was a little perturbed and ignorant about the arrangement of the family and her own life. She even had some resistance. Then, during the Summer Fire Festival, she met Yi Dao and fell in love with him. However, Yi Dao fell in love with another woman. She was a little disappointed and heartbroken in love. Then, Yi Dao died. She couldn't stand the passage of time and gradually grew old. She sighed with emotion about the desolation of the scenery and the deep memory of Yi Dao. "Miss Yu Qingcheng, am I right?" The 4 childs were a little confused. It seemed that what he said was a little meaningful. Xue Wuhan and Long Xuelu wanted to refute, but they didn't know how to do so. They were not good at these literary things. They were only used to solving problems with force. However, it seemed that they couldn't deal with this guy in front of them with force. Therefore, they felt a little aggrieved, very aggrieved. However, after hearing the last sentence of Yi Qinghan, they were shocked and surprised. "Yu Qingcheng? Wasn't Yu Qingcheng the saintess of this summer fire festival? Was the graceful woman who was rowing the boat for them Yu Qingcheng?" Therefore, they were a little shocked. They fixed their eyes on the woman at the back of the boat. The long and slightly curved eyelashes of the woman at the back of the boat trembled. There was a trace of surprise in her dark eyes. After a moment of silence, she put down the joystick in her hand, lifted the curtain, and walked in slowly. She bowed in a low voice and said in a soft voice, "Yu Qingcheng pays her respects to the childs." "Oh, Aya!" The childs in the boat felt as if they were struck by lightning. What was going on? Why didn't Yu Qingcheng play her cards according to common sense? They thought of their ugly behavior and naked greedy eyes just now. They thought that they still had a lot of beautiful things that they hadn't shown yet. They thought that they were going to show off in the evening at the Summer Fire Festival. In the end, Yu Qingcheng played her cards carelessly and appeared in advance. All their hopes might be in vain. They wanted to cry, but had no tears. Only Yi Qinghan and Yun Yang were calm. Yun Yang smiled, walked to the back of the boat, and started rowing the boat. Yi Qinghan nodded slightly. He cupped his hands and said, "Yi Qinghan pays his respects to Miss Qingcheng. Greetings to Miss Qingcheng." When the rest of the people heard Yi Qinghan's words, they immediately reacted. The thick skin they had cultivated for many years came into play. In an instant, Everyone recovered their cultured and elegant demeanor of the childs of famous families. Everyone, please take a seat. Yu Qingqing faintly nodded her head and sat on the only empty chair at the front. She looked at Yi Qinghan with interest and said, "Young Master Han is very talented. Each of your words is like a gem, and your tongue is like a lotus flower. Your explanation is very good and correct. Qingqing admires you. Young Master Han is Senior Knight Blade's only son, right?" Yeah. Feng Zihua and Long Shuelu looked at Yi Qinghan in surprise. They didn't expect Yu Qingqing to have such a high evaluation of Yi Qinghan. And the first thing she said was actually to ask about Yi Qinghan's background. Hearing that Yi Qinghan was actually Yi Dao's son, they couldn't help but feel a little strange. Wasn't Yi Dao's son a good-for-nothing? With Yi Qinghan's talent and terrifying beast, if he was a good-for-nothing, then they could only go to the mines and work as laborers. Yi Qinghan's reputation was not very well known in the family. In addition, the information from their respective families was not in place yet. So they thought that Yi Qinghan was a genius that was secretly trained by the Yi family. They didn't expect him to be Yi Dao's son. Good for nothing? Only Shui Wuhan smiled bitterly. A few months ago, he also thought so. That's right. On behalf of my father, Yi Qinghan expresses his gratitude to Senior Yu Yin for her infatuation and his sorrow for the loss of her beauty. Although I don't know much about my father's life, I feel that he always felt a trace of guilt and sorrow for Senior Yu Yin. Qinghan also deeply admires Senior Yu Yin. Yi Qinghan bowed slightly, but he felt very helpless in his heart. Father, you have a romantic debt, yet you want me to apologize and clean up your mess. It's okay. Aunt Yu Yin didn't regret falling in love with you even before she died. She once said, "In this world, only Yi Dao is a real man. I don't regret my choice that year." Yu Qingqing sighed slightly. Her eyes were a little blurred, as if she was recalling some past events. "Aya, young Master Han, you're in the wrong. I only found out now that you're the son of Senior Yi Dao, whom I admire the most. You're not a good friend." Feng Zi was unhappy when he heard that. He looked at Yi Qinghan with hidden bitterness. A man with bulging muscles like a giant from the God of Barbarians was looking at a man with hidden bitterness. No man could stand it. Yi Qinghan didn't look at him. He said embarrassedly, "You didn't ask me. Do you expect me to tell everyone I meet that I'm Yi Dao's son?" "That's right. Do you, Feng Zi, also tell everyone you meet that I'm a lunatic and that I'm a lunatic?" Flowers and grasses quickly chimed in, with a smile on their pretty faces. They looked very pretty. Ha! Everyone laughed heartily, and the awkward atmosphere was swept away. It didn't matter if they lost face just now. What was important was to get it back as soon as possible. Therefore, everyone began to present their treasures. They performed the performance and speech that they were going to perform at night in advance, hoping to get back some impression in front of the beautiful woman. However, the performance was about to end before it even started. The small boat had arrived at its destination, Tranquil Lake Island. Looking at the beautiful woman drifting away, looking at the beautiful scenery in front of them, everyone's emotions were complicated for a moment. Chapter 57. As they watched Yu Qingqing's figure gradually disappear on the small path of the island, they reluctantly withdrew their gazes and stood rooted to the ground. When they didn't know that she was Yu Qingqing, they only felt that this woman's figure was really graceful, and her every movement had an otherworldly aura. When Yi Qinghan revealed her identity, she threw down the armrest and walked over leisurely. Everyone saw the pair of black pearl-like eyes above the white silk scarf and smelled the delicate fragrance that was naturally emitted from her body. Only then did everyone realize that Yu Qingqing was actually so enchanting, even a little enchanting. There was no need for words. As long as she sat there quietly and looked at you with her clear, black pearl-like eyes, you would feel especially enraptured and overwhelmed. All right, stop looking. We've already walked so far. Won't we be able to see her true appearance at night? Yi Qinghan said softly, with a faint smile. Everyone withdrew their thoughts and their souls that had floated far away and smiled embarrassedly. Young Master Han, not bad. You've taken the initiative. I didn't know that you were so powerful. You're actually skilled in both the pen and the sword. Eh, how did you know that she's Yu Qingcheng? Fengzi said with a laugh as he returned to his senses and hugged Yi Qinghan. That's right, young Master Han. Yu Qingcheng is a holy maiden. Before the Summer Fire Festival, she definitely can't leave the Tranquil Lake. How could you know her? Could it be that you've snuck in before? Huaji also came over curiously. As a descendant of the assassin god, his concealment skills were top-notch. However, he probably didn't have the ability to sneak into the Tranquil Lake Island. Long Shuelu and Shui Wuhan, who were at the side, were too embarrassed to come over. However, they pricked up their ears and listened curiously. It's very simple. You guys just didn't notice. Yi Qinghan wasn't used to Feng Zi's enthusiasm. He shrugged and said calmly, "First, there are many beauties in the Yu clan. However, if there are beauties of this level among the boatmen, then all the beauties in the world are too common. Secondly, temperament. How could a woman rowing a boat have such an otherworldly temperament? Third, that scarf of hers was the biggest flaw. Young Master Long had said before, a masked woman was either extremely ugly or extremely beautiful. The Yu family naturally wouldn't have an extremely ugly woman, so she would definitely be an extremely beautiful person. Even if a boat servant was extremely beautiful, I don't think there was a need for her to cover her face. That would be akin to burying one's head in the sand. Fourth, that little song. When Yu Qingcheng sang that song, her tone was a little sorrowful and a little melancholy. From the poem, I could tell that it was written by Senior Yu Yin-er. Since she felt sad about Senior Yu Yin-er's deeds, it was very likely that she felt sad because of what happened to Yu Yin-er in the past. Therefore, I made a decisive guess, and it turned out that I was right. Respect. Young Master Han indeed has a discerning eye to be able to observe these small details in such detail. Your words have awakened me from my dreams. Fengzi thought about it carefully and nodded. However, he suddenly thought of a problem and shouted, "What's that? Young Master Han, you're still so young. You won't fight with me over Yu Qingcheng, right? Let me tell you, although we're familiar with each other, your father is also someone I respect. If you dare to fight with Yu Qingcheng, I'll still fight with you." Just now on the boat, Yi Qinghan obviously had the upper hand and left a deep impression in Yu Qingcheng's heart. Moreover, this brat had a rather delicate appearance, and his strength and the forces behind him were not much different from theirs. If Yi Qinghan really took the initiative to attack, he wouldn't have any chance at all. That's right, young Master Han. You're not even 16 yet. Yu Qingcheng is already 16. Don't tell me you're fated to fall in love with an older sister? Once Feng Zi said this, the beautiful man Hua Shu also became anxious. His family had given him a strict order to fight for this opportunity. Moreover, he had also seen Yu Qingcheng. She was indeed a devastatingly beautiful woman, so he also said this anxiously. Long Shuelu and Shui Wuhan also tensed up. One had to know that in the entire house of Aries, the 5 most powerful and promising Yus were all gathered here, so it could be said that they had the greatest chance. However, if Yi Qinghan took the initiative to fight for it, then their chances were really not high. Long Shuelu had been slapped by Yi Qinghan before, so he already felt a little inferior in front of Yi Qinghan and couldn't raise his head. As for Shui Wuhan, because Yi Qinghan was here, he didn't dare to go against Yi Qinghan openly for fear that Yi Qinghan would flip out, so he lowered his stance. So the two of them leaned to the side nervously, silently paying attention to Yi Qinghan's words. Why not? A fair and graceful lady is a gentleman's desire. Moreover, isn't it just a few months? I don't mind. Yi Qinghan chuckled and looked at the 4 nervous people in front of him, teasing them. As expected, when he finished speaking, their faces darkened. After a moment, he nodded in satisfaction and continued. However, if the 4 of you agree to one condition of mine, I can promise you that I won't take the initiative to woo Yu Qingcheng. There's something good? Say it. As long as it's not asking me to kill my father, I'll agree. When Feng Zi heard this, he immediately beamed and patted Yi Qinghan's shoulder heavily. Although he was a little surprised that Yi Qinghan would say such a thing, if there was such a good thing, he naturally wouldn't give it up. Say it, I won't hesitate if I can do it. Fengzi expressed his attitude, a hopeful look on his face. As long as it's within my ability, no problem, Shui Wuhan said calmly. However, he was a little surprised, so he was a little reserved in his words. Long Shuelu patted his chest and smiled slightly. Young Master Han, just say it. Ha! Yi Qing'an laughed. To be honest, he admired Yu Qingcheng. But he felt that a holy maiden raised in such a way by such a clan was a little arrogant and a little cold. Moreover, he was a little male chauvinist. If he had to circle around such a girl all day like a dog around its master, he would be very uncomfortable and displeased. Moreover, he thought that because of the incident with his father, Yi Dao, Yu Qingcheng probably didn't like him. So he used this groundless attitude in exchange for a condition from everyone. Of course, the most important thing was that his younger sister was lying unconscious in the mountains behind the Yi family. Her life was hanging by a thread, so he really didn't have the mood to woo girls. Thus, he said very seriously, in the Elite Academy tournament, I want the few of you to help me get as many points as possible. Of course, you can't drag me down. Just this? Fengzi asked in disbelief after waiting for a long time for Yi Qing'an to propose such a condition. Just this. Why don't you agree? Yi Qing'an said with certainty. This world was really not as important as saving his younger sister. And if the few people in front of him agreed, his journey to the Elite Academy tournament would be much smoother. Agree? 200% agree. Fengzi answered quickly. Agree. No problem. Agree. The other three nodded quickly and agreed unanimously. Of course, they would be fools not to take such a great advantage. This condition was equivalent to no condition, and they would lose a strong opponent for nothing. Why not? Let's go. Yun Yang is waiting anxiously in front. Today, I want to drink a few barrels of good wine with young Master Han. You're such a good brother. Fengzi laughed loudly and walked forward with his arm around Yi Qing'an. Hua Hua's beautiful eyes narrowed into slits as he followed them and said seriously, Young Master Han, you're my brother. Shui Wuhan and Long Shuelu looked at each other and felt the doubt in each other's eyes. What was Yi Qing'an up to? He actually gave up such an opportunity that all the men in the world dreamed of so easily. Could it be that there was something else going on? However, the two of them couldn't figure it out no matter how hard they thought about it, so they could only follow him embarrassedly. After they left, a green figure slowly walked out from the small forest at the side. Above the white silk scarf, there was a slight frown on her exquisite eyebrows. That pair of black pearl-like eyes also shone with an inexplicable meaning. It was a little playful, and a little curious. Chapter 58. There were many wonderful things in this world, such as friendship. Yi Qing'an promised not to pursue Yu Qingcheng. As expected, Hua Xia and Fengzi let go of their grudges and became brothers with Yi Qing'an. Long Shuelu and Shui Wuhan didn't seem to be too intimate, but for the bonfire party tonight, Yi Qing'an wouldn't play tricks and ruin their plan. They could only pretend to be friendly and get cold feet from Yi Qing'an. Tranquil Lake Island wasn't big, but the scenery was beautiful and the air was fragrant. Most importantly, the buildings here were very unique. There weren't many houses on Tranquil Lake Island. They were divided into East Yard, West Yard, and North Yard. There weren't many houses in the East Yard. It was mainly used to receive guests, so it was usually empty. The West Yard was where the young disciples of the Yu family lived, so there were more houses. The North Yard was where the higher-ups of the Yu family lived. Ordinary people couldn't even get close. They could only look at it from afar. It was said that there were only 800 houses on Tranquil Lake Island. Compared to Yi family's castle or other families' residences, which had thousands of houses, it was pitifully small. However, these 800 houses were all made of bamboo, which was unique. On the island in the middle of the lake, there were dense trees and bamboo houses among the trees. It gave them a very special feeling. Some were elegant, some were fresh, and most of them were comfortable. No wonder all the beauties from the Yu family had such a special temperament. On such a small island, in such an environment, it would be strange if they weren't special. They were arranged to stay in a small yard in the East Yard. The yard was called Emerald Pavilion. There were 6 to 7 houses and a hall. Young masters, please rest here first. I will bring you to the bonfire party tonight. Yunyang said respectfully after she brought Yi Qinghan and the others into the Emerald Pavilion and served them tea, wine, and cakes. Then, she smiled mysteriously and clapped her hands. After a while, a few beautiful women in red entered the Emerald Pavilion. The women in red stood in front of the Emerald Pavilion and bowed, successfully attracting everyone's attention. Yunyang smiled and said, "The bonfire party will only begin at night." Yunyang was afraid that young masters would be bored, so she called a few outstanding disciples of the family to accompany you. You can do as you please. Yunyang will take her leave first. See you at night. Can you do as you please? Yunyang had already left, but her words were still echoing in their ears. This sentence was very good, very powerful. Of course, the meaning was clear. These women were sent by the Yu clan to entertain the young masters. You could do as you please, use them as you please, play with them as you please. She was a beauty, a top-grade beauty. She was a product of the Yu clan, and she was even used to entertain important guests. Of course, she was a fine product, a peerless beauty. Although these women were just standing there indifferently, their clothes were not particularly open. They wore red palace dresses, and on their exquisite facial features, there was a hint of shyness mixed with a hint of charm. The combination of innocence and charm was so perfect that it could practically make an honest person take off his pants and commit a crime. These were not the outer disciples of the Yu clan in the Moon Tower. They were the inner disciples that the Yu clan had cultivated for many years. The art of charm had been cultivated to the bone. There was no need to deliberately show it. As long as they stood there quietly, the charm emitted from their bones could stimulate the male hormones of any normal man to a limitless rise, and the evil fire in their lower abdomen would be ignited. Long Shuailu was the first to react. His Adam's apple moved by accident. However, as if he had done something wrong, he quickly coughed softly and picked up the tea to cover it up. He was a regular customer of the Moon Tower. Of course, he knew the unlimited charm of the Yu clan's women. He also very much wanted to have fun with the women in front of him. Even under his white robe, the dragon root had already raised its head slightly. However, he could not move and did not dare to move. Not only him, everyone in the room did not dare to move and could not move. They could only suppress it and try not to look at the 5 enchanting women in front of them. What were they here for? They came to the Yu clan, of course, to play with women. They came to taste the Yu clan's enchanting women that all men in the world dreamed of. However, what they wanted to do now was to play with the Yu clan's most beautiful and most honorable saintess. Before they got it, they did not dare to move recklessly and could not move recklessly. The only natural person in the room was Yi Qinghan. He was firm without desire. He was not afraid of anything and did not ask for anything. Therefore, he very naturally admired the 5 peerless beauties. He squinted his eyes, had a smile on his face, and constantly made clicking sounds. 5 beauties, don't just stand there. Each of you find a young master to sit with. Yi Qinghan looked at the 4 young masters who were trying their best to suppress themselves. A trace of playfulness flashed in his eyes, and he very naturally instructed, "Since you want to move but do not dare to move, then this young master will help you fulfill your wishes." The scene at this moment was very familiar to him. He thought of the nightclubs in his previous life. In the private room, rows of ladies stood respectfully and coquettishly, waiting for the customers to order. However, the beauties here did not greet them. The ladies in the nightclubs would greet them as soon as they entered. Of course, the ladies here were of a much higher class than the ladies in the nightclubs, and definitely could not be compared. No need. Almost at the same time, 4 voices sounded in the hall. The voices were very determined, very suppressed, and also had a tinge of regret and bitterness. "Young Master Han, you enjoy yourself. I'm a little tired, so there's no need." Fengzi chuckled and winked at Yi Qinghan, as if he understood. Huaxia also blinked her beautiful eyes and said a little shyly, Young Master Han, you enjoy yourself. I'm not used to it. Yes, yes. Long Shuelu nodded like a chick pecking rice and said very seriously. Shui Wuhan did not speak and lowered his head. Ah, is that so? Yi Qinghan chuckled and pretended not to see their expressions. He slowly drank a cup of tea and enthusiastically said, "Since everyone is tired, let's take a good rest. Ladies, I'll have to trouble you to perform a sexy dance. Do something explosive so that the young masters can rest well." Ah! The four of them glared at Yi Qinghan angrily, as if they wanted him to eat them, but were too embarrassed to say no. If they did that, they would really be deceiving themselves, and it would be too pretentious. However, seeing that Yi Qinghan had his head down and was fiddling with the tea leaves, completely ignoring their burning gazes, the few of them could only helplessly remain silent. Seeing that the few of them did not object, the few bewitching beauties responded softly, bowed, and retreated. Not long after, they came in again. Their clothes were still red, but they were a lot less. Only a thin tube top, a very short muslin skirt, and an almost transparent muslin were left on the outside. They nodded faintly and waved the muslin in a leisurely manner in the hall. The dance was beautiful, but the people were even more beautiful. Beauties who wore less could dance even more beautifully. The air in the hall heated up under the swaying of the white, tender flesh and the red, sexy little skirt. The sound of swallowing saliva, trembling of the Adam's apple, and coarse breathing mixed with the sound of Yi Qinghan's clicking of the tongue could be heard frequently. The air in the hall was unconsciously mixed with a scorching heat, a surging wave, and a ripple. Enough, enough. All right, ladies, thank you for your hard work. You may leave first. Shui Wuhan drank 4 cups of tea in a row, but the more he drank, the hotter his body became. When he was about to drink the 5th cup of tea, he finally suppressed the fire in his heart and said loudly, "Yes, all right. Why do I feel that the more I dance, the more tired I am?" Fengzi drank a cup of tea in one gulp and felt that it was not enough, so she gulped down another cup and said while panting, "Yes, yes." Long Shuelu nodded again like a chick pecking rice, and his expression was even more serious than before. Hua Hua did not speak, but only nodded and lowered his head. It was as if the 5 beauties in the room were poisonous scorpions, and he did not dare to look at them again. "Don't!" Yi Qinghan plucked a grape from under the table and threw it into his mouth. As he chewed, he said, "They dance very well. It's rare to have a chance to enjoy the super treatment of the Yu family, so we should cherish it." "Why? Do you think that these beauties dance badly?" "They dance very well, that." "Young Master Han." Fengzi looked at Yi Qinghan angrily, as if he was blaming him for his prank. He deliberately emphasized the words, "Young Master Han," to show his anger, and continued, "But we are not used to this. If young Master Han likes it, I can give the one who serves me to young Master Han." "Yes, young Master Han, that's enough. I'm tired too, so I'll give them to you too." Hua Hua raised his head and said sincerely. Long Shuelu and Shui Wuhan looked at each other and said in unison, "Us too. Young Master Han, you can enjoy it slowly. We are not used to it." "Oh, I see." Yi Qinghan smiled mischievously, but he was laughing coldly in his heart. These animals, if they were not here at this time, they would probably rob them. After a moment of silence, he said embarrassedly, "How can I accept it? It's okay, it's okay. There are plenty of rooms next door." Fengzi stood up and waved his thick hands, indicating that he could do as he pleased. Then, it would be impolite of me to refuse." Yi Qinghan laughed lewdly and stretched lazily. He looked at the 5 beauties of the Yu family and said sincerely, "Since they are not used to it, why don't we go into the room together and study the art of the human body?" The beauties did not speak and only smiled shyly. They nodded slightly and surrounded Yi Qinghan as they walked out of the room. "What's that?" "Young masters, I'm going to rest for a while. You guys rest well too and perform well tonight. I have high hopes for you guys." Yi Qinghan did not forget to look back as he walked out of the hall and continued to tease them. Then he laughed loudly and disappeared from everyone's sight. "Animals, animals." Yi Qinghan, this animal, he really dared to do it. He actually did it. Feng Zi said angrily as he clenched his fists as he watched Yi Qinghan's figure disappear from the room. Hua Xiao also looked at the bamboo door of the room reluctantly and said angrily, I hate animals like him who don't care about brotherhood and value sex over friendship the most. When you go out with him in the future, don't tell anyone that I know him. Yi Qinghan is really lewd and unruly. Shui Wuhan waved the fan in his hand quickly, as if he could blow away the restlessness and injustice in his heart. Long Shuelu didn't say anything. He just kept pinching and pinching the grapes on the table. Chapter 59. Tranquil Lake Island, North Court. In an independent small bamboo building, a masked woman in a green palace dress was standing quietly in front of the window. She looked at the dense bamboo forest in the distance and said nothing. Miss! After a while, a woman in white walked in softly. She bowed and called out respectfully. Then she stood aside silently. What's the situation at the Emerald Pavilion? After a long time, Yu Qingqing sighed deeply and turned her head. Her black pearl-like eyes flickered as she whispered, Miss, as you expected, after Yu Qi and the others went in, the young masters behaved themselves very well. They didn't do anything excessive, but later, young master Yi Qinghan asked Yu Qi and the others to dance, an erotic dance. Then, young master Shui Wuhan asked them not to dance. Young master Yi Qinghan then he brought Yu Qi and the others into the room. The woman in red said carefully, this was related to the life of the Mississippi. She didn't dare to say anything that would affect the misjudgment. Yu Qingcheng didn't have any expression and still stood there quietly. However, after she heard that Yi Qinghan brought Yu Qi and the others into the room, her black pearl-like eyes flashed a trace of inexplicable meaning. She asked curiously, what did Yi Qinghan and Yu Qi do after they went in? Do what? The woman in red was a little puzzled by the question. What else could a man and a woman do in a room? So, she was a little shy and said shyly, of course they did that. The family scout said that they could hear moaning coming from that room. Yi Dao's son isn't that lustful. Call the scout team and activate the family mechanism. Peep, peep, and report back quickly. A trace of shyness and anger appeared on Yu Qingqing's face. She didn't think that the young man on the boat with eyes like lightning, intelligence like the sea, and special temperament would be so unbearable. How could Yi Dao, who even the sanest didn't care about, give birth to such an unbearable son? She also didn't believe that with her charm, she wouldn't have a trace of attraction and love for Yi Qinghan. The Yu Clan scout team moved very quickly. In less than a moment, news came back. The woman in red looked at the information in front of her inexplicably. She said in puzzlement, Miss, there is no such thing happening in the room. Yu Qi is moaning loudly there. Yu Ba is massaging Yi Qinghan, and Yi Qinghan seems to be asleep. Yu Qingcheng didn't show the slightest bit of happiness when she heard the answer that she was hoping for. The Black Pearl's eyes flashed with a trace of anger. She looked outside the window and said angrily, Yi Dao's son is actually the same as Yi Dao. He doesn't even care about me, the saintess. At noon, the early summer sun was a little warm and made people sleepy. However, it seemed that the sunlight of the tranquil lake did not make people sleepy at all. Instead, it made people more and more energetic. Inside the green pavilion, the four young masters drank a few pots of tea, a few jars of wine, and countless plates of fruits and pastries. After sitting there awkwardly for more than 2 hours, the deafening moans in the room outside the hall finally stopped. Creak! A few minutes later, the room door was pushed open, and Yi Qinghan walked out feeling refreshed. He reached out to wipe the drool from the corner of his mouth and stretched his body. Then he took small steps and walked into the hall. As soon as he walked into the hall, he smelled a very sour smell. Yi Qinghan didn't care. He ignored the complicated gazes of the others and sat down casually. He picked up a bunch of grapes and ate them. As he ate, he nodded and praised. The grapes of the Yu clan are indeed different from those of other places. They seem to be sweeter. What are you guys looking at? Eat them. Who? Feng Zi, who had just drunk a mouthful of wine, spat out the wine in her mouth when she heard this. She said somewhat angrily, "Young Master Han, don't attack people like this. If you do this again, I'm going to fall out with you." Everyone's eyes bulged, as if they wanted to use their gazes to despise him. They had seen shameless people, but they had never seen such a shameless person. He enjoyed 5 exquisite, bewitching beauties by himself, and the moment he came out, he still didn't hide his arrogance at all. They had listened to the erotic songs for more than 2 hours, and there was already a fire in their hearts. But this brat was showing off so openly. "Don't be angry, lunatic. Don't be angry. Didn't I just say that the grapes were delicious? Is there a need to be so angry? Why don't I ask Yin Yang to arrange something else for you?" Yi Ching Han waved his hand and said with a smile, "Don't. You're ruthless, brat. I'm afraid of you, all right?" Feng Zi had a bitter expression on her face. She cupped her hands and ignored him. The others at the side didn't dare to say anything. After witnessing this brat's viciousness, who would dare to pick a fight? If this brat did something else tonight, they would be completely finished. "Young masters, have you rested well?" At this moment, Yun Yang walked in and said with a beaming smile. When she looked at Yi Ching Han, her charming eyes slightly narrowed with a smile that was not a smile, causing Yi Ching Han's hair to stand on end. Feng Zi's bitter expression immediately blossomed when Yun Yang walked in. She smiled and said, "It's all right. It's mainly because young Master Han rested well." Yes, young Master Han rested the best. Long Shuailu also stood up. There weren't many opportunities to add insult to injury, so of course he wouldn't let it go. "Thank you, Yun Yang. Young Master Han likes it very much." Hua Hua blinked her beautiful eyes and said calmly. Shui Wuhan also smiled and waved the folding fan in his hand as if he would never get tired. "Thank you, Yun Yang. Of course young Master Han likes it. It's all right, it's all right. Yun Yang's arrangements are definitely not wrong. Why don't we arrange it again in the afternoon, young masters?" Yi Ching Han stood up slowly and glanced at the young masters. He scratched his head and immediately retorted, "The 4 of you said that young Master Han rested well, and young Master Han also said that he rested well. Then Yun Yang's efforts were not in vain. Why don't we arrange a few more in the afternoon?" Yun Yang's whole body was glowing with a smile, reflecting the faint refraction of the sun behind her. She seemed to have become much younger and more charming. "No need." Other than Yi Ching Han, the 4 of them said in unison, their attitude very firm. If they had to listen to the erotic songs for the entire afternoon, who knew if they would go crazy? Seeing Yun Yang look at him, Yi Ching Han licked his lips and looked at the 4 of them. However, he saw the silent pleading in their eyes. He said a little embarrassedly, "Since they are so insistent, I can only give them some face." "Forget it." Then forget it. How about this? Yun Yang will take you to lunch first. After lunch, I will take you to enjoy the beautiful scenery of the tranquil lake." Yun Yang smiled and nodded. "That's great." Feng Zi was the first to respond and followed Yun Yang out of the Emerald Pavilion. Shui Wuhan and the other 2 heaved a sigh of relief and followed. Yi Ching Han chuckled, touched his chin, and followed them. They had lunch in a private room near the Emerald Pavilion. During the meal, they did not have much appetite, so they only ate a little. However, Yi Ching Han ate heartily, as if he had never eaten such delicious food before. He was completely like a country bumpkin. However, he really did not have the opportunity to enjoy such high-class food. When he was young, he was very unpopular in his family. It was good enough that he could eat his fill. After that, he went to Man City because he was short of money, so he did not dare to go to a good restaurant. When he came back from Man City and had money, he did not have the time to eat good food. He killed people and set fires. It was very lively, but in the end, he did not have a full meal and was thrown to the back of the mountain. In the back of the mountain, Yi Tianlong and the 2 old men had a light meal. In addition, he was worried about his sister, so he did not eat well. Now that they had finally arrived at the Yu family and had the first feast in this world, Yi Ching Han ate with excitement and ferocity. He did not know how to describe it. Even Feng Zi and the others' plan to get him drunk was ruined. They all looked at Yi Ching Han in a daze, wondering why the Yi family was so poor that they did not even have a good meal. Yun Yang, who was at the side, also came to a sudden realization. No wonder Yi Qingyo was so ruthless. It turned out that the Yi family was about to run out of food. After eating and drinking, the few of them began to tour the mountains and rivers. Although there were no mountains, there was a lake. The scenery of the calm lake was not bad, but Yun Yang did not bring them to the West Court or the North Court. They only looked at the ordinary scenery. The few of them began to feel bored, so they apologized to Yun Yang and went back to rest. Yi Qinghan, on the other hand, had slept for more than 2 hours. He wouldn't be able to fall back asleep even if he went back. He also didn't lack this bit of time to cultivate, so he simply rejected Yun Yang's company and quietly walked along the lakeside. Xiaohei, come out and play. Yi Qinghan felt that there was no one around. It was a good time to walk the dog, so he summoned Xiaohei. Although he had been chatting with Xiaohei in his heart, it had been a while since he had accompanied Xiaohei for a walk. Yi Qinghan kind of wanted to see this silly dog. Boss, you finally remembered me. As soon as Xiaohei came out, he jumped happily. He was currently in the growth stage and did not need to be fed with magic crystals every day. Every day, he would absorb battle chi from Yi Qinghan's war beast space. When he slept, he would absorb battle chi. His body had long been rusty. Now that he came out, he was like a runaway horse, running around everywhere. Xiaohei, don't run around. Huh? You can swim? Yi Qinghan looked at Xiaohei dotingly. When he saw Xiaohei suddenly jump into the lake, he said worriedly. However, he saw Xiaohei's 4 small melon seeds gliding through the lake. He said in surprise, "Oomph, you're looking down on me, aren't you? No matter what, I'm at least a holy beast. This little thing can't stump me. I'll go catch some fish to eat." Xiaohei sent a message through his soul. A trace of pride flashed through his black eyes, and he dived into the water with a splash. This soul-devouring beast can actually speak so well? Yi Qinghan laughed and thought to himself. This little guy was indeed worthy of being a holy beast. It was full of intelligence. Poo-pew. After a while, fish flew straight towards Yi Qinghan as if they could fly. Yi Qinghan looked at the black silhouettes that were as slippery as loaches in the water. He could not help but shake his head and smile. Huh? Yi Qinghan, what secret technique is this? It can actually make the fish jump out by themselves? The strange scene here shocked others. A gentle voice sounded from behind him. It was a little surprised and a little puzzled. Yi Qinghan turned his head in astonishment. He saw a graceful woman wearing a green palace dress and a white silk scarf slowly walking over. Her pearl-like eyes looked at Yi Qinghan in amazement. Tonight is Miss Qingqing's big day. How do you have the time to play a coincidental meeting with me? Yi Qinghan chuckled and lowered his head slightly as he spoke. It's not a coincidental meeting. I purposely came to meet you. Yi Qinghan's black, pearl-like eyes flashed. There was a trace of a smile and agility. Chapter 60. Oh, you specially came to meet me? Yi Qinghan raised his eyebrows and said in confusion, Miss Qingcheng, this seems to be the second time we've met, right? I don't think there's anything special that requires you to specially come for me, right? Yu Qingcheng didn't say anything. She just turned her body and looked at the quiet lake quietly. The light eyebrows on her forehead frowned slightly and said with some resentment, Since it's the second time we've met, I wonder what Qingcheng did wrong? What made young Master Han hate Qingcheng so much? Hate? This? Where did this come from? Yi Qinghan was slightly surprised and didn't understand. At the same time, he sent a telepathic message to Xiaohei and asked him to go play at the side. He didn't want his trump card to be seen by Yu Qingcheng. The reason why a trump card was a trump card was because others didn't know about it. Yu Qingcheng rolled her black, pearl-like eyes. She was a little blaming and a little annoyed. This rolling of her eyes didn't look ugly at all. Instead, it made her originally pure temperament more mischievous and clever, which made Yi Qinghan excited. Yu Qingcheng was a little hesitant. Actually, with her identity, she shouldn't have come here and said such shameful words. However, Yi Qinghan's words of not taking the initiative to woo her and his unusual behavior in the Emerald Pavilion had successfully aroused the competitive spirit of a little girl in Yu Qingcheng's heart. The Yu clan's holy maiden, Li Dai, had bewitched all the men in the world. However, the previous generation's holy maiden had fallen under Yi Dao's robe, which made the Yu clan's holy maiden feel an unprecedented humiliation. And now, Yi Dao's son was the same. How could she endure this? Therefore, when she heard that Yi Qinghan was taking a walk alone, Yu Qingcheng didn't hesitate and hurried over. It was just a conversation. Facing Yi Qinghan's direct question, Yu Qingcheng didn't know what to say. Looking at Yi Qinghan's expression, it was hard to tell if he really didn't understand, or if he was pretending not to. Yu Qingcheng bit her lips and said angrily. Qingcheng heard what young Master Han said when he first came to the island. In young Master Han's unconventional performance in the Emerald Pavilion, Qingcheng also heard about it. Isn't that young Master Han hates Qingcheng? Sure enough, Yi Qinghan thought to himself, so this little girl came here in a fit of pique. It seems that father dumped their saneness back then, which made them lose a lot of face. Does she want to regain face from me? No way. After figuring out the cause of the matter, Yi Qinghan smiled brightly and innocently. It's this thing, Miss Qingcheng. I'm willing to explain. I'd like to hear the details. Yu Qingcheng turned her head, and a trace of happiness flashed through her eyes. She listened attentively. Miss Qingcheng, actually you've misunderstood. Actually, this is a conspiracy. Yi Qinghan chuckled and said with a somewhat complacent smile. His words were like a clap of thunder, which successfully aroused Yu Qingcheng's interest. He continued, actually, my love for Miss Qingcheng is like the bright moon in the sky, like an endless torrential river. To put it simply, I love you so much that you want to die. The seas dry up and the rocks crumble, the earth tremble, the sky fall, and the earth crack. But Miss Qingcheng has so many pursuers. I'm not as beautiful as that transvestite Hua Hua, not as handsome as that idiot Long Shuilu. My demeanor is not as outstanding as that hypocrite Shui Wuhan, and my muscles are not as stylish as that lunatic. My strength and influence are also slightly weaker than theirs. So I thought and thought, how can I stand out among so many pursuers of yours? So I thought of a shocking move, loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Look, didn't he successfully lure Miss Qingcheng out? Beautiful Miss Qingcheng, you must believe in my sincere love for you. At the beginning, Yu Qingcheng listened with interest. But the more she listened, the darker her black, pearl-like eyes became. Even an idiot could tell that he was making fun of her. Finally, after Yi Qinghan finished speaking, she did not speak for a long time. She sighed deeply and said with some resentment, if Mr. Han doesn't like Qingcheng, you can say it clearly. There's no need to make fun of Qingcheng. Sorry for disturbing you. Qingcheng will take her leave. Yi Qinghan's sincere speech would definitely make an ordinary woman smile until her eyes turned into crescent moons. But what kind of person was Yu Qingcheng? She was the holy maiden who stood out among the hundreds of women of the Yu clan. Whether it was intelligence, or appearance, she was the best. How could she not hear the sincerity in Yi Qinghan's words? Looking at Yu Qingcheng's lonely and desolate figure gradually disappearing in the emerald green bamboo forest, Yi Qinghan touched his chin embarrassedly. He was wondering if he had gone too far. To attack a little girl like this, without any enmity between them, it seemed that he felt a little guilty. Night gradually approached. A full moon, like a shining silver plate, was slowly lifted up from the west. The gentle moonlight began to sprinkle down, illuminating the entire Fire Dragon continent and the entire Tranquil Lake Island. The Yu clan was already busy at dusk. Countless people came out from the West Court and the North Court, decorating the wide lawn in front of the three courts. Today was the Yu clan's big day. It was a big day that happened once every 15 years. Of course, they had to be cautious and grand. The turf had been trimmed neatly a long time ago through the efforts of countless people in the Yu clan. A huge open-air camp was set up on the wide lawn. In the center was a row of roaring bonfires, and on both sides of the bonfires were rows of satin spread on the ground. On top of the satin were rows of short square tables made of ancient wood. The square tables were filled with fruits and wine. On top of the bonfires, golden yellow suckling pigs and suckling lambs were being roasted, making crackling sounds. The 5 young masters arrived neither too early nor too late. Apart from Yi Qinghan, who was still dressed in black, the other 4 young masters were dressed extremely dazzlingly. They wore all kinds of tailor-made banquet robes. Their long black hair was combed neatly, and their faces were always rippling with charming smiles. They had been taught since they were young to have a noble temperament in their every movement. It made the 4 of them look like fighting chickens in a flock of chickens. They were like cranes in a flock of chickens, dazzling and eye-catching. It made Yi Qinghan, who was following behind, look like a bodyguard, pale in comparison. A group of young masters and young masters were already sitting in the open space. They were the elite children of the famous families in the House of Aries. However, there was still a gap between their families and the 5 major families, so they did not receive the treatment of Yi Qinghan and the others. It was not until the evening that they were received by the Yu clan into the tranquil lake island and directly brought to the bonfire party. There were countless beautiful girls scattered around the open space. These were the tranquil lake disciples of the Yu clan. They had been nurtured for many years. They were also the main targets of this group of young masters. Most of these young masters were nominally subordinates of the 5 great clans and the manor lord. Thus, when they saw Yi Qinghan and the others walk in, they immediately stood up and rushed forward to greet them. Lu Xiao greets young Master Shui. Young Master Shui looks radiant today. You will definitely be the top courtesan. Brother Z, I'm Chao Pei. Do your best, Brother Z. Take you Qingqing back to West Wind City. Young Master Hua, I'm the cousin of your uncle's nephew. It's an honor to meet you. Young Master Long. Young Master Long. I've long heard of your name. Today, I can finally meet you. I'm extremely excited. The 4 young masters smiled faintly and casually responded to the young masters who came to greet them. They were somewhat proud and somewhat arrogant. They looked askance at Yi Qinghan, as if showing off their fame and status. Why should they be proud? Why should they be arrogant? Because the people who came to greet them were all heading towards the 4 of them. No one paid attention to Yi Qinghan, who was following behind them. After arriving at the Yu family, they had always been suppressed by Yi Qinghan. So today, they finally had the opportunity to suppress him. So they were very excited, very excited. Normally, they would not care about such a scene, but they were very enthusiastic. Yi Qinghan smiled faintly. He ignored them and walked to a square table alone. He poured himself a cup of tea and lowered his head to drink. Excuse me? At this moment, 5 young masters suddenly walked straight to Yi Qinghan and bowed respectfully. They seemed a little excited and a little scared as they asked politely. Yi Qinghan raised his head in astonishment and looked strangely at the unfamiliar young masters in front of him. He frowned, and the 4 people who had been chatting with the crowd were also slightly shocked. They looked over with interest and seemed to find it strange that there was someone who knew this country bumpkin. And when the young masters saw that Yi Qinghan was frowning, they bowed even lower, and their tone became more respectful. They said in a slightly trembling voice, "Excuse me, are you the one who crippled Yi Qingquang, killed Yi Rong, and imprisoned Yi Jian, young Master Yi Qinghan?" As soon as the words fell, the whole place fell into a dead silence. The 4 young masters opened their mouths wide, and their bodies trembled slightly. But they recovered their calmness immediately, but their hearts were in turmoil. They had received news from the Yi family some time ago. The Yi family had undergone a great change. Yi Jian was imprisoned, Yi Qingquang was crippled, and the elder of the Yi family, Yi Rong, was dead. But the reason was unknown in the news. Now that they heard that all these things were done by Yi Qinghan, their first feeling wasn't shock but funny. But at the same time, they started to think about the truth of these words carefully. And the young masters at the side were also half doubtful and half shocked. They thought this young man was just a follower or something. They didn't expect him to have such a powerful background and such a fierce story. So their eyes changed at the same time, and they looked at Yi Qinghan respectfully. No matter whether he did it or not, the fact that he could sit here today and represent the Yi family, it itself represented a certain attitude of the Yi family. And the attitude of the Yi family was one that must be respected. Countless beauties of the Yu family standing at the side also looked at Yi Qinghan with slight surprise. Although they already knew that this skinny young man dressed in black, who didn't look particularly outstanding, was the popular young master of the Yi family. And they also heard some rumors indirectly that this young master actually didn't even care about the saint of the Yu family, Yu Qingqing. But this was the first time they heard that Yi Qinghan had actually done such a big thing. Yi Jin, Yi Rong, and Yi Qingquan were all famous people in the House of Aries. Of course, they had heard about it. But now, all of them were actually crippled and destroyed by this ordinary young man. For a moment, the ripples in their eyes started to turn, and they all used their charming eyes to look at Yi Qinghan. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. I am Yi Qinghan. What's the matter? Yi Qinghan was a little angry. He looked at the 5 idiots in front of him with some reproach. How could these things be spoken carelessly here? Dongfang Dao, Nangong Chang, Sima Fu, Xiao Gong, Duga Jin, greet young master. The 5 of them didn't say much, but they all knelt down in front of everyone. Their eyes were actually filled with hot tears, and they put on a good show of searching for their master. What are you all doing? Get up. Can you give me an explanation? Yi Qinghan was a little confused. He frowned and stood up. The 4 young masters were dumbfounded. This Yi Qinghan actually did something like this. Wasn't he stealing their limelight? However, it seemed like Yi Qinghan wasn't acting, so they continued to watch seriously from the side. On the other hand, the young masters at the side were in an uproar. They all knew these people, and they had some dealings with them. They were the top 5 young masters among the young masters of their level. Regardless of whether it was martial strength, talent, or intelligence, they were all top-notch. Now, they actually recognized him as their master in front of everyone. One had to know that this recognition was no joke. This was a master that they would follow for life. Chapter 61. At Yi Qinghan's words, the 5 people quickly stood up. The young master in the middle, who called himself Dongfang Dao, stepped forward and said respectfully, "Young master, have you heard of Master's dripping blood guards? We are the descendants of the 5 guards. When Master died, our clans were suppressed by Yi Jian. In recent years, the patriarch has gone into seclusion and the young master is still young. So our 5 clans did not dare to act rashly and could only live in seclusion. Now that young master's power has been extinguished, the old patriarch has come out of seclusion again. Of course, our 5 clans will come out again. After obtaining the consent of the patriarch, we will come to serve young master." The dripping blood guards? Yi Qinghan suddenly understood. His father, Yi Dao, had used his unparalleled charm and peerless strength to subdue 5 strong men. They were known as the dripping blood guards. But when his father died on the God-slaying mountain, the 5 experts also died, so Yi Qinghan did not know how to react for a while. Now, the 5 people who suddenly appeared were the descendants of the 5 masters. At this time, Yi Tianlong must have played a part in the show of searching for his master. It seemed that Yi Tianlong had spared no effort in order to win back his heart. After figuring out the situation, Yi Qinghan nodded, pointed to a row of square tables behind him, and said, "Well, you sit behind me, we'll talk in detail later." The 5 people nodded, sat respectfully at the back, and remained silent. Yi Qinghan did not care about the gazes of the crowd. He sat down alone and began to drink tea. He was not overly intimate with the 5 people behind him. On the one hand, the identity of these 5 people had yet to be confirmed. On the other hand, even if there was no doubt about their identity, he still had to examine their strength and character. He did not intend to take 5 wastes or 5 villains to participate in the sect battle. After watching the excitement, getting to know each other and flattering each other, everyone lost interest and took their seats. There were 3 rows of square tables in the Yu clan, forming the word door. The seats above the door were obviously for the Yu clan or the older generation. Yi Qinghan and the other 4 sat in the first row on both sides of the door. The rest of the young masters knew that their statuses were different, so they consciously sat behind them. Congratulations, young Master Han. You've gained another 5 strong generals. Feng Zi sat next to Yi Qing Han and raised her wine glass. Hua Chao, Long Shuilu, and the rest quickly raised their glasses too. Although Yi Qing Han had promised not to take the initiative to attack, it didn't mean that he couldn't cause trouble, right? Therefore, the 4 of them would try to curry favor with him whenever they had the chance, even though Yi Qing Han didn't really like it. Same to you. Yi Qing Han nodded and raised his glass. As everyone chatted and chatted, the doors of the North Court of the Yu clan finally opened under everyone's hopeful gazes. The first to come out was a beautiful middle-aged woman. Her age couldn't be determined, and her figure was still graceful. Her skin was rosy like a young girl's, but there were faint crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, which made her look a little old. Behind the beautiful middle-aged woman was a tall man dressed in green. The man's eyes were like a bull's, bulging as if they were about to jump out. Behind him were 3 old men. They walked to the front with a smile and naturally sat down at the top row of square tables. Greetings, 5 grand elders. Everyone hurriedly stood up. The rules of the Yu Clan Summer Fire Festival were held and judged by the 5 grand elders of the 5 clans. They all knew this, so they weren't surprised. However, Yi Qing Han casually cupped his hands, but his eyes were staring at Yi Qingyo as if he was blaming and questioning him. What was up with the 5 people behind him? Brat, don't glare at me. They were arranged by your grandfather, and they are indeed the descendants of your father's dripping blood guards. There are no problems with their character and strength, so make good use of them. Yi Qingyo squinted his eyes, smiled, and transmitted his voice. Yi Qinghan rolled his eyes, but didn't say anything. These people were his father's descendants, so they were truly his people. Since Yi Qingyo said that there were no problems with their character and strength, then there shouldn't be any problems. He would observe them in the future and make good use of them. Young masters, you are the elites of the new generation of the House of Aries. Today, I am honored to represent the Yu clan in welcoming you to the Summer Fire Festival. Your presence brings light to the tranquil Lake Island. Now, I announce the official start of the Summer Fire Festival. Yu Ji smiled and stood up. She said a few simple pleasantries, then announced the official start of the Summer Fire Festival. In the beginning, the young masters thought that there would be a very long and complicated speech. Now that they saw that Yu Ji was so understanding and immediately entered the main topic, they couldn't help but smile very sincerely. Their smiles were very bright and happy. Yu Ji was also very happy to see everyone laughing so happily. She gently raised her hand. However, after a moment, she seemed to have discovered something. Her expression was somewhat solemn, and she didn't lower her hand in midair. She only stared blankly at the northern sky. Yi Qingyo, Xue Fei, and the others also stopped whispering and looked at the northern sky with some solemnity. Yi Qinghan and the others were also puzzled. They also looked toward the northern sky, but they didn't discover anything. However, after a moment, a deafening roar suddenly sounded in the northern sky. Then, a black that rapidly grew larger in everyone's eyes. A dragon roar? It's a level 7 demonic beast, the winged dragon. Only then did everyone realize what the Grand Elders were looking at. They were shocked, but they calmed down in the blink of an eye. However, the excitement in their eyes were obvious. In all these years in the House of Aries, there had never been a case of a magical beast running into the 3 prefectures to cause trouble. Therefore, it was obviously impossible for a wild magical beast to come here. Since it wasn't wild, then it was very simple. This 7th level magical beast, the winged dragon, was reared by someone. As a powerful existence, the winged dragon wasn't something that ordinary people or clans could rear. There was only one place on the continent that could rear a winged dragon, and that was the Divine City. This winged dragon was clearly flying toward the tranquil Lake Island. That meant that someone from the Divine City had come. The Divine City. What did the Divine City represent? If the tranquil lake was said to be the holy land in the hearts of the men in the House of Aries, Then the divine city was the holy land in the hearts of the people in the world. 5,000 years ago, the three prefectures often fought because of the differences in races and civilizations. Every time the three prefectures fought, a large number of warriors would die. Countless civilians, demons, and barbarians would be affected. Until 5,000 years ago, a mysterious man named Tu was born out of thin air. He single-handedly defeated all the experts of the three prefectures on the sacred mountain where the three prefectures fought. He forced the three prefectures to stop fighting and establish the divine city on the sacred mountain where the three prefectures fought. After that war, the divine city became the most powerful existence on the continent. Its brilliance was like the stars in the sky. It was so dazzling and unsurpassable. It also brought 5,000 years of peace to the continent. At least the civilians wouldn't die for no reason. Those who like fighting, sure, go to the prefecture battles and kill to your heart's content. The more you kill, the more you'll be rewarded. Those who like peace, sure, live a peaceful life without having to worry about the mutated races coming to your doorstep in the middle of the night. Afterward, other than a few loose rules, the divine city had never interfered with the affairs of the prefectures. It stood quietly on the divine mountain, like an otherworldly master, smiling at the clouds in the sky and calmly watching the storms in the world. It was because of the divine city's indifferent attitude that the people of the three prefectures began to accept the sacred mountain and the divine city represented by the powerful man. However, there were talented people in every generation. Countless experts and heroes appeared in the past few thousand years. They seemed to care a little about the tall divine city, which was pressing down on their sky and blocking their way. Therefore, they picked up the swords in their hands, walked up the mountain, and walked into the city. However, the ending was always the same. No one had ever walked into the divine city with a sword and walked out again. Never. Therefore, the divine city became a sacred place in the hearts of the people on the continent. The divine city became a taboo existence. But today, during the Summer Fire Festival, the Tranquil Lake welcomed a special guest for the first time. A guest from the divine city. How could the people here not be shocked? How could they not be shocked? How could they not be excited? They looked at the approaching winged dragon, as well as the young man dressed in fluttering white robes on it. Yi Qinghan narrowed his eyes. He didn't have a good impression of the divine city. He had always been resisting that tall, sacred mountain in his heart. It was as if that mountain was too high, so high that the people on the continent couldn't even lift their heads. And now, the divine city actually sent a young man to the Tranquil Lake. What was the meaning of this? Yuji finally put down her hand, but her expression was not as solemn as before. She smiled at the young man in the sky. Since the divine city didn't send those old fellows, but a young man. Today was the Summer Fire Festival, the day the Yu clan chose a son-in-law. The young man's purpose for coming here in such a grand manner was already very clear. Although it might not be a good thing, it would at least not be a bad thing. Therefore, he was slightly relieved. Yi Qingyo and the others, on the other hand, had solemn expressions. With their status, they had the right to talk to the old fellows of the divine city. However, the young man who came to the divine city today was someone they had never seen before. Moreover, he was so ostentatious and brazenly coming to steal women. How could they not be worried? How could they not be angry? Fengzi, Hua Hua, and Long Shuelu looked a little gloomy. Another strong opponent had come, and from the looks of it, he looked pretty good. Most importantly, he had a mountain behind him. Meanwhile, Xue Wuhan wasn't as cultured and refined as he used to be. His expression wasn't gloomy either. Instead, there was some inexplicable joy and excitement. Yi Qinghan didn't care. He continued to drink his wine with a lazy look. After a short while, he regained his desire to be strong again. I'm not asking for anything, and I don't want anything. The more you guys fight, the more exciting it will be for me. It'll be a waste if I don't watch a free monkey show. Boom! The winged dragon landed heavily on the ground in front of everyone's eyes. The moment the winged dragon landed, a white figure lightly tapped his feet. His entire body emitted a golden light. Like an ancient god, he He glided and floated towards the crowd. Landing steadily on the ground, the golden light instantly retracted. The young man in white smiled and cupped his fists towards the few Grand Supreme Elders at the head of the table. Tu Qianjun greets the seniors. I've long heard of Lady Qingqing's unparalleled beauty. Today, I, too, have specially come to pay my respects. Furthermore, I heard that the young elites of the House of Aries are all here. I, too, also hope to be friends with the Martial Arts Association. Chapter 62. Tu Qianjun greets seniors. I've long heard of Miss Qingqing's unparalleled beauty. Today, I too specially came to pay my respects. Also, I heard that the elites of the younger generation of the Battle Gods Manor are all here. I, too, also hope to make friends with them. Pay my respects? They're probably here to snatch her? Make friends with Wu? Make friends? They probably want to give her some pointers? The few elders on the seats sneered secretly. When this brat descended, the golden light emitted from his body was the unique aura of the Duke Realm, also known as the Pseudo-Saint Realm. Furthermore, his golden aura actually reached a radius of around 1 meter. It seemed that he had the cultivation of the first level of the Duke Realm. He actually released his aura and scrupulously in front of them, who were all in the Saint Realm. Furthermore, he relied on it to glide for such a long distance, making people feel as if he was flying over. Wasn't this clearly showing off his strength? It was also clearly slapping the faces of the young masters present. It was also to build momentum for him to snatch her. It seemed that the chances of those young masters and their clan were slim. However, Yu beamed with joy. This brat was rather tactful and respectful to these old fellows. Moreover, he had made it clear that he was here to pursue his daughter, not to cause trouble. She also knew that this generation's saintess was more outstanding than the previous generations of saintesses in all aspects. However, she didn't expect that even the divine city, which rarely appeared, would send people to snatch her. What was this? This was glory. This was also strength. Hence, she smiled brilliantly. Young master, too, must be the young master of the dragon-slaying divine guard of the divine city's 4 guards. You're indeed as graceful and elegant as your father. Servants, give him a seat. Elder Yu, my father asked me to send his regards to you. There's no need to give me a seat. I have an old friend here, so I'll sit with him. Tu Qianjun smiled faintly. He turned his head and swept his gaze across the young masters. Finally, his gaze landed on Shui Wuhan. Young master, please take a seat. Shui Wuhan had been smiling all along. When he saw Tu Qianjun looking over, his smile became even more amiable. He hurriedly stood up and lowered his head slightly, indicating for Tu Qianjun to take his seat. Tu Qianjun nodded indifferently. It seemed as if he didn't care about everyone's gazes. He walked straight to Shui Wuhan's seat and sat down peacefully. He lowered his head and smoothed his sleeves. He saw that the people in the vicinity were looking at him cautiously. He raised his head in astonishment and said, "What's wrong? Do as you wish. Don't worry about me. Just pretend that I don't exist." Yes, yes. The people around him hurriedly lowered their heads and continued to drink, sip tea, and eat fruits. Their hands and feet were slightly trembling, and they accidentally spilled some of the wine in their hands. Those who were eating the fruits panicked and even ate the vines. Their expressions betrayed their panic and nervousness. Fengzi and Hua looked at each other. They could see the worry and shock in each other's eyes. This Tu Qianjun was only 27 or 28 years old, yet he already possessed the strength of a duke. This was a little too terrifying. It should be known that the two of them could be considered first-rate geniuses. At the age of 24, they were already at the 3rd level of the general realm. Coupled with their family's secret arts, their combined strength was only at the 1st or 2nd level of the martial realm. It was fine if they couldn't match up to him in terms of power. After all, the divine city's glory was built through generations of battles. If they couldn't match up to him in terms of strength, then it would be a little embarrassing. Long Shuelu was also silently drinking his strong wine at the side. He occasionally glanced at Shui Wuhan, who was whispering beside Tu Qianjun, and a trace of mockery and loneliness flashed across his eyes. It was obvious that he was a little envious that Shui Wuhan had actually made friends with a young master of the Divine City. However, he also looked down on Shui Wuhan's flattering behavior. Of course, it was mostly because he couldn't eat the grapes, so he said that the grapes were sour. Tu Qianjuan's appearance suppressed the entire crowd. Relying on the tall mountain behind him and his astonishing strength, he descended like a deity, instantly enveloping the entire lake's light on his body. In a battle between two armies, the most important thing was momentum. Without momentum, this battle would only end in defeat. Yi Qinghan didn't show any expression, even though he was a little displeased with Tu Qianjuan's attitude, which was even more arrogant than Yi Qingquan. However, he didn't intend to carry Yu Qingqing to bed today, so he didn't feel like he was facing a love rival. However, he hated Shui Wuhan's flattering attitude even more than Long Shuilu. This brat usually looked like a dog, but deep down, he was really a dog. Clap, clap. When Yu Ji saw that everyone's mood had somewhat calmed down, she clapped her hands twice and began to serve the pastries in front of the main course. Along with the clap of her hands, the door of the west courtyard opened, and 12 red-clothed women walked out. It just so happened that this red dress was very similar to the dress that they wore when they entertained Yi Qinghan and the others in the Jadeite Pavilion in the morning. The upper body was a thin tube top, and only the lower half of the white and tender beautiful breasts were covered, revealing a plump, snow-white semicircle. The lower body was a gauze skirt, and under the uneven hem was a pair of perfectly straight and slender white legs. On their feet were pairs of long leather boots that covered more than half of their calves. The only difference was that today, on their smooth abdomen, which didn't have any extra fat, hung a small purple bell. Snow-white skin, captivating red dress, and the purple ring around their waists. These three colors actually fused and intersected, evolving into a strange charm. The dance was somewhat similar to the belly dance of Yi Qinghan's previous life, but it was clear that no one would appreciate such a beautiful and artistic dance. They only stared with bulging eyes at the group of women, who were constantly swaying because of their twisting bodies, as well as the limitless scenery under the gauze skirt that was blown up by the wind from time to time. Yi Qinghan and the others, as well as the few old fellows above, were still fine. Their identity and status didn't allow them to be too out of line, but the other young masters didn't have so many misgivings. All of their eyes were bulging so much that they were actually bigger than Yi Qinghan's. Under the reluctant gazes of the crowd, the 12 women silently retreated, while the young masters were silently thinking of ways to snatch one from the Yu clan. Although the Yu clan Summer Fire Festival was mainly for the Saintess to choose a man, almost every time after the matter of the Saintess was settled, the Yu clan would choose a portion of the young masters with relatively higher aptitudes, strength, and influence, and gift them the 12 tranquil lake women of the Yu clan. Although it was called gifting, it was actually no different from selling them. Every Yu clan woman would be exchanged for a large amount of resources and treasures. However, these young masters who managed to snatch the Yu clan women wouldn't hesitate at all. Moreover, their clans would also be willing to use a large amount of treasures to exchange for the Yu clan woman. Of course, this wasn't just because the tranquil lake women of the Yu clan were unparalleled in the world. Any man who married a tranquil lake woman would obtain the most pleasure and satisfaction in the body. It was also because if the young masters of these clans could marry a tranquil lake woman, then their clans would automatically obtain the friendship of the Yu clan. They would receive a large share of the Yu clan's intelligence, martial power, and resources until the woman died. It could be said that the reason the Yu clan women could stand tall in the House of Aries for 1,000 years was also because of this marriage alliance policy. Oh, so that's how it is. This marriage alliance policy was thought up by the genius of the Yu clan. How brilliant! Yi Qinghan exclaimed in admiration as he understood many things he didn't know before from Feng Zi's soft explanation. Feng Zi nodded as well. Her eyes were filled with admiration. The founder of the Yu clan, the Moon Queen. A miraculous woman who made the ancestors of the 4 great clans, the Wind Lord, the Flower Empress, the Snow Marshal, and the Night Emperor fall head over heels for her. Back then, her martial power and cultivation reached the peak of the Sage realm, half a step into the divine realm. According to the clan's records, this woman naturally rejected the 4 great ancestors. She walked in a Silver Moon city alone and created the Yu clan. Stop talking. The dishes are about to be served. You have to perform well later. I'll cheer for you. Yi Qinghan saw Yu Ji raise her hands and clap her hands again. He knew that Yu Qingsheng was about to go on stage. He quickly nudged Feng Zi and looked behind Yu Ji. Hearing this, Feng Zi immediately straightened her body and sat up straight. She looked forward very seriously. As Yu Ji clapped her hands lightly, the sound of a guzheng rang out from West Court. She was playing an unknown song. Not many people present understood this. They only felt that the sound of the guzheng was like the whispering of young girls at first. It was pleasant to listen to. Then, the tune changed rapidly like the torrential rain in summer. Water droplets fell onto a jade plate. It was very crisp. Then, it changed to the sound of an ancient spring in the mountains flowing between the cracks of a rock. It was very pleasing to the ear. Finally, it changed to the sound of an armored horse's blade. It made people's blood boil. Even though everyone present was uncouth, they were gradually moved by the pleasant sound. For a moment, their hearts felt very ethereal and very peaceful. In the end, when the sound of the guzheng turned into the sound of a blade, everyone felt like they were in a battlefield of 10,000 people. Their blood boiled. Buzz! Just as everyone's blood was boiling, the sound of the guzheng suddenly stopped. Everyone looked in the direction of West Court in surprise. They saw a peach-colored figure floating out from West Court. The peach-colored figure was a woman. She wore a peach-colored palace dress, and her face was covered with a peach-colored silk scarf. There was even a bright peach blossom on her head. The woman had a sword in her hand. Her left hand was held diagonally below, and her right hand was in front of her. She held a small and exquisite guzheng in her hand. She leaped down from the sky. Her palace dress flapped in the wind, making her look like a fairy from beyond the heavens. It was unknown whether it was because of the strong wind or the woman's own will, but when the woman landed on the ground, the peach-colored silk scarf on her face actually fluttered with the wind, revealing a devastatingly beautiful face. Her black pearl-like eyes contained a smile that was both charming and seductive. Her delicate nose was tall and straight, and the corners of her small mouth were slightly raised. Her red lips were slightly parted, inviting people to kiss them. Below her slender white neck, there was a piece of white jade that was half covered and half covered. When it contrasted with the peach-colored palace dress, it was so soul-locking. Her white waist was actually so small that it couldn't be grasped. Her entire person was like a fairy that had fallen into the mortal world. She made people feel that she couldn't be profaned, that she couldn't be violated. However, she was also invisibly attracting people, making them want to profane her, to go on top of her. This kind of feeling was extremely contradictory. Normally, no one would wear a peach-colored dress that was unique, and no one dared to wear it because peach-colored clothes gave people a very tacky feeling. But today, Yu Qingqing dared to wear it, and she wore it. Moreover, she even wore an even more tacky peach blossom. It was just that after today, presumably, no one present would dare to say that peach-colored clothes were tacky. At least Yu Qingsheng was not ordinary. Not only was she not ordinary, but that faint peach-colored color on her graceful figure, coupled with her devastatingly beautiful face, gave people a feeling that she was so attractive, so ecstatic, so fatal. Peach blossoms were poisonous. They could topple cities, could topple countries, and could even poison people to death. Chapter 63. The lady with peach blossoms stood there quietly. Her eyes glowed, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. Then, she placed the zither on the ground. Her 5 slender and elegant fingers danced wildly, emitting a few clanging notes. The long sword in her left hand formed a flower, and she actually began to play and dance. She played a hurried and rhythmic marching song. Although there would be occasional breaks as she played and danced, the The special reverberation of the zither didn't make people feel that there was a break. Instead, they felt that the rhythm was different, and it was very dynamic. The dance was a sword dance, and it was very good. Sometimes it was hard, sometimes it was soft. Furthermore, everyone present was an expert and could see that the swordsman wasn't a pretty one. Aside from being pretty, one could see the formless, murderous aura that accompanied the sword dance. The sword was a killing weapon, a yang weapon of extreme yang. The woman was a beauty, a woman who was as gentle as water. But today, the combination of the beauty and the sword was actually so perfect, accompanied by the clanging sound of the zither. Everyone felt as though they were on a battlefield filled with corpses. A peerless woman who had lost her lover was killing people with a sword. Moreover, the way she killed people was so beautiful and moving. The sword dance ended, and the song also ended. However, the young masters were still immersed in that moving scene just now. It was like a dream or an illusion, and they were intoxicated. Only when Yu Qingqing bowed slightly and returned to Yu Ji's side to sit down did everyone suddenly come to their senses. They applauded in unison. Lady Qingqing can topple a nation. This trip of Qinjuan's was not in vain. This dance can raise a great white. Tu Qinjuan's eyes sparkled. He picked up a large cup of wine on the table and shook it at Yu Qingqing. He raised his head and laughed as he drank it. His actions and tone were extremely elegant and flawless. Yu Qingqing smiled faintly and nodded without saying anything. Lady Qingqing's sword dance is unparalleled in the world. No one in the world can compare to you in playing and dancing at the same time. This dance should raise a large jar. Feng Zi hurriedly stood up and said, not to be outdone. She raised a large jar of wine and drank it all in one go. She didn't stop at all and drank it all without leaving a drop. Seeing that Feng Zi didn't even gasp for breath after finishing a jar of wine, Hua Hua and Long Shuelu, who were about to raise their cups, were dumbfounded. This lunatic is indeed a lunatic. How can we endure this? We can't possibly offer 2 jars, right? In the end, they didn't raise their cups anymore. Instead, they picked up their teacups and shook it in a toast. They said a few polite words to express their admiration for Yu Qingqing. After that, the young masters took turns to express their praises. They praised Yu Qingqing's performance to the point that there was nothing in the heavens that was unparalleled on the earth. Although their words were different, their purpose was the same. They were all expressing, "We admire you very much, we cherish you very much, we want you very much, we are willing to marry you and treat you like a treasure, we hope that you will pay attention to us, consider us, we are not bad," and so on. Yu Qingqing nodded faintly and smiled in response. Finally, her gaze stopped on Yi Qinghan, who was happily eating the pork roasted on the bonfire. Her eyes flashed with a hint of, as expected. After a moment of silence, he raised his head and said coldly, "Young Master Han, why didn't you express your opinion? Is Qingqing's performance so unworthy of a single word from you?" Yu Qingqing was very beautiful, and her dance was also not bad. Yi Qinghan also wanted to praise her. But since Yi Qinghan had promised Feng Zi and the others, he had to at least do some superficial work. Otherwise, he would break his promise. And if he broke his promise now, Yi Qinghan was afraid that Feng Zi and the others would also break their promise and cause trouble during the residence battle. In his heart, his sister's life was naturally the most important. Therefore, when he was dancing with Yu Qingqing, he focused his attention on the golden pork roasted on the bonfire. At this moment, he naturally wouldn't follow the others to flatter her, even though the buttocks of this horse were really not bad. Not bad. Feeling Yu Qingqing's cold gaze, as well as Feng Zi and the others' covetous gazes, Yi Qinghan raised his head slightly and said. He then continued to focus his attention on the roasted pork. It seemed that this pig looked more delicious than Yu Qingqing. Ah, not bad? What did that mean? All the young masters looked at Yi Qinghan, who was engrossed in his battle with the pig, with a variety of expressions on their faces. This was the first time Yu Qingqing had spoken today, but this young master didn't feel excited or flattered. But he actually said, "Not bad," in such a perfunctory manner. After he finished speaking, he continued to eat, not even looking at Yu Qingqing. Not to mention that Yu Qingcheng was devastatingly beautiful. Her dance today was really not bad. Just the fact that Yu Qingcheng was the Yu clan saintess, with such a noble status, he still had to say a few perfunctory words to her. Today, Dongfang Dao and young master Nangong Chong wanted to recognize him as their master. They originally thought that this young master was very fierce, but they didn't expect that he was even more fierce to the point that he didn't even care about the Yu clan saintess. Dongfang Dao and the others looked at each other and laughed, giving Yi Qinghan a thumbs up. Meanwhile, Feng Zi, Hua Hua, and the others were all beaming with joy as they repeatedly raised their cups. They naturally knew why Yi Qinghan was like this, and now it seemed that this brat was really interesting. He kept his promise and was a good brother. Tu Qianjun also looked over with a smile, a trace of interest in his eyes. He whispered a few words to Shui Wuhan beside him, then glanced at Yi Qinghan a few times, then silently looked at Yu Qingcheng and didn't say anything. Yi Qinghan didn't care about the gazes of the crowd, nor did he care about the warning look Yi Qingyo gave him. Instead, he slightly tilted his head and said to Feng Zi beside him in a low voice, "What are you giggling for? Hurry up and perform well. Do you know what it means to gain the upper hand by a show of strength?" "Thank you, good brother." Feng Zi slapped his forehead and stood up. He let out a light cough to attract everyone's attention. He wriggled the two bulging muscles on his chest and said in a carefree voice, "Today is Miss Qingqing's coming-of-age ceremony. I, Feng Zi, am not talented, so I will also perform a few sword dances to celebrate." Although he said it was a sword dance, Feng Zi didn't reach out to hold the sword. Instead, he made a strange gesture. He stretched out his index and middle fingers of his clenched fists and leisurely swung them forward. With a sword hum, the huge sword on his back suddenly unsheathed and turned into a beam of white light that flew straight into the sky. Then his fingers quickly changed. The huge sword twisted a few times in the air, turned around, and fell straight towards the bonfire. When it was about to touch, Feng Zi quickly changed his gesture again. The huge sword actually made a circle around the bonfire, pierced through a suckling sheep, and flew towards Yu Qingcheng. It flew to the table in front of Yu Qingcheng and stopped. After shaking a few times, the suckling sheep was actually split into 7 or 8 pieces and fell onto the jade plate on the table. After this was done, Feng Zi withdrew his hand gesture and the huge sword returned to its sheath. Only then did he say, with a satisfied smile, "I've made a fool of myself, Miss Qingcheng. This roasted suckling sheep is a small token of my appreciation." "Young noble Feng, thank you." Yu Qingcheng smiled and nodded in thanks. At the same time, the young noble next to her gave Feng Zi the middle finger in his mind. "You're playing so big right from the start. You only used your Feng clan's ultimate sword control technique. How can others play later? Plus, even if you want to please Yu Qingcheng, you don't need to use the big guy that you kill people to make a living to cut meat. Old man Feng, not bad. Your brat's sword control technique has probably reached the 6th level." Yi Qingyo whispered to the Feng clan supreme elder on a square table above. Yu Ji also nodded with satisfaction and said, "Small area control is already very good." With the power of a 3rd-level general, I'm afraid even a 1st-level marshal can't beat him. Feng Zi's talents are considered the best in your Feng clan in the last 100 years. His future is limitless. Where? Compared to the descendants of your clans, I still have to work harder. The Feng clan supreme elder said humbly, but his face was full of joy. My brat is ready to go. Let's see what special performance he has." The Hua clan's elder smiled and drew everyone's attention to the field. Seeing that Feng Zi got the first prize, Hua Hua was a bit unhappy. He stood up and nodded at Yu Qingcheng. He said, "I'm also here to join in the fun. I'll give Miss Qingcheng a mysterious gift." Saying this, Hua Hua slowly walked toward the field. His steps were very elegant and light. However, as he walked, his body slowly became blurry in front of everyone and finally disappeared. Stealth? Everyone was shocked and changed their expressions. They had heard of the Hua clan's stealth technique, but they didn't expect Hua Hua to disappear in front of everyone. If he sneaked up to them and stabbed them, wouldn't they die? The only young people who didn't change their expressions were the descendants of the four great clans, Long Shuailu and Tu Qianjun. Long Shuailu had seen this before, so he didn't panic. Tu Qianjun didn't have any expression, but his eyes revealed a trace of contempt. It seemed that he didn't care about this kind of small trick. Of course, the few supreme elders in the field wouldn't be shocked, nor would their expressions change. Although Hua Hua's stealth technique was quite good, under the powerful cultivation of the Saint Realm, it was equivalent to not being invisible at all. Hua Hua left very quickly and came very quickly. After everyone opened their eyes wide and looked around for a moment, Hua Hua finally appeared. However, he directly walked toward Yu Qingcheng. He held a purple rose in his hand and walked with strange steps. His speed seemed very slow, but a series of afterimages appeared behind him. In the field, 3 Hua Hua appeared. Hua Hua held roses in his hand and walked over with a smile on his face. The scene was extremely strange. Finally, the afterimages disappeared and Hua Hua stood in front of Yu Qingcheng. He bowed sincerely and said, "Miss Qingcheng, may your beauty be like this bouquet of roses that will never wither." "Thank you, young Master Hua." Yu Qingcheng still had an indifferent expression. She extended her lily-white hand and took the purple rose. He had even used the afterimage clone technique to pick up girls. That transvestite actually used such an awesome escape technique to put on a show. Everyone shook their heads and secretly decided that they wouldn't embarrass themselves later. Anyway, the descendants of the four great clans, Long Shuailu, and a young master from the Divine City were there. Even if they thought about it, they wouldn't have any hope. It was better to think about how to snatch one of the 12 elite girls from the Yu clan. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.